It was a night just like any other for Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear. The three brothers were curled up in their cave, the air carrying the smell of pine and cool night rain. Usually, the forest outside was alive with chirping crickets, distant owls, and the faint rustle of little feet in the undergrowth. But tonight, there was nothing. Grizz stirred first, his ear twitching. He blinked into the dark, listening hard. "Panda, do you hear that?" Panda sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hear what?" Grizz frowned. "Exactly." They all noticed it, then Ice Bear lifting his head silently, eyes narrowing. No wind in the trees, no frogs, no insects. Just a strange, heavy quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Grizz, ever the curious one, pulled on his scarf. "Come on, let's check it out. Maybe the animals are having a party without us." Panda shivered. "Or maybe something scared them away." Ice Bear said nothing, just grabbed a flashlight. The three stepped out of their cave. Their paws crunched on the cold earth, the only sound in the night. Even the moonlight felt different, too still, too pale. They passed the familiar berry bushes and the little stream where frogs like to sing. But the water was unmoving, like glass. Panda whispered, "Why does it feel like the forest is listening to us?" Grizz laughed nervously. "You've been reading too many spooky comics." Still, they all felt it, the way the darkness seemed to lean closer around them. Just then, Ice Bear stopped suddenly. His flashlight beam fell on something by the base of an old oak tree, a set of paw prints. But they were unlike any animal tracks they had ever seen. Too long, too deep, and leading deeper into the woods. And so, without a sound to guide them, the three brothers followed the strange prints into the silent forest. The paw prints sank deep into the damp earth, each one wider than Grizz's paws and stretching far apart, as if whatever made them took long, heavy steps. They followed slowly, their breath misting in the cool air. The forest loomed around them, its tall shapes bending under the pale moon. Not a twig cracked, not a leaf rustled except for the soft crunch beneath their own feet. Panda kept glancing over his shoulder. We're not lost, right?" Grizz smirked, but his voice was quieter than usual. "No way. I know these woods like the back of my paw." Ice Bear's eyes scanned the darkness. Trees feel different. The prints curved toward a place they rarely visited, a thick cluster of trees where the branches knit so tightly together that even moonlight had trouble getting through. The shadows here seemed to cling to the ground as if afraid to move. When they reached the edge, they saw it, the paw prints stopped. Completely. No fading into the distance, no turning aside, just gone. Panda gulped. "So, whatever it was, it either flew away or..." Grizz raised an eyebrow. "Or what?" Panda didn't finish. He didn't have to. Ice Bear stepped forward, his flashlight beam brushing across the low branches. Something glinted there, a thin ribbon of silver tangled around a twig. It was smooth and cold to the touch, with faint symbols scratched into it. Grizz turned it over in his paw. "It's, metal, in the middle of the forest." They all felt it, then the air around them grew heavier, as though the trees were leaning closer, listening to their every move. The silence pressed tighter. And then, from far away, but close enough to hear, came a single sound. A soft, slow tap, tap, tap. They froze. The tapping came again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud, but in the empty forest it sounded as clear as a knock on a door. The bears looked at each other. Grizz tried to smile. "Okay, so maybe it's just a woodpecker. A very slow woodpecker." Panda shook his head. "Woodpeckers don't stop the whole forest from making noise." Ice Bear adjusted his grip on the flashlight. Woodpecker's not here. The sound was coming from deeper inside the thicket where the paw prints had vanished. Between the tight branches and low-hanging leaves, the darkness was thick, swallowing the moonlight entirely. Grizz stepped forward first, pushing a branch aside. It felt oddly warm, as if it had been touched by sunlight, but there had been no sun for hours. They moved slowly, their paws sinking into damp moss, the tapping guiding them one careful step at a time. Panda whispered, "Does it sound closer now?" It did, and stranger too. The taps were no longer steady, sometimes slow, sometimes quick, as if whoever made them was listening, deciding when to tap next. They came into a small clearing at the very heart of the thicket. In the center stood an old wooden stump, its surface smooth and pale, as if it had been sanded over many years. The tapping stopped. Grizz approached, running his paw over the surface. "It's, warm?" Before they could speak more, something caught Panda's eye. Around the edge of the stump, carved deep into the wood, were the same faint symbols they had seen on a silver ribbon. Ice Bear's voice was low. "Symbols are watching us." And then from the other side of the clearing, a branch snapped. Not a gentle snap, but sharp and quick, like something heavy had stepped down. They turned toward the sound. The three froze, eyes locked on the darkness between the trees. Grizz whispered, "Hello?" His voice felt small in the heavy stillness. No answer. Just a faint shuffle, like fabric brushing against bark. Panda's fur prickled. He stepped closer to Grizz, clutching his arm. Ice Bear tilted his head. "Something's there." The flashlight beam trembled slightly in Grizz's paw as he raised it toward the sound. At first, there was nothing, just layers of shadow. Then, between two trunks, a shape leaned forward. It wasn't big, no taller than Panda, but it was thin, almost too thin, with long arms that hung lower than they should. The light didn't quite touch it, as though the shape swallowed it up before it could land. Panda's breath caught. "Grizz." "I see it," Grizz said softly. The figure didn't move, it only tilted its head slowly, like it was studying them. The silence pressed harder, as if the forest itself wanted to hear what would happen next. Then, without warning, the figure stepped back. One step, then another. They heard no leaves crunch, no twigs break. It was as if it was gliding. Grizz took a step forward instinctively. "Wait." That's when he saw it. On the ground where the figure had been standing, a single silver ribbon lay coiled like it had been dropped in a hurry. The same strange symbols glinted faintly in the dim light. Ice Bear bent to pick it up, but stopped halfway. From far off, the tapping began again, faster this time. Tap, 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 tap. And this time, it was coming from more than one direction. The tapping came from the left, then from the right, then behind them. The bears turned in slow circles, the beam of the flashlight sweeping over the trees. But the forest seemed to lean away from the light, keeping secrets hidden. Panda's voice trembled. "It's, moving around us." Grizz tried to sound brave. "Maybe it's just the wind." They all knew there was no wind tonight. The sounds weren't rushing closer, but neither were they fading away. They kept a steady distance, like footsteps pacing in a circle. The tapping sometimes quickened, sometimes slowed, almost like it was thinking. Ice Bear's eyes tracked the darkness. "We are being followed." They backed toward the stump in the center of the clearing. The smooth wood seemed warmer now, like it had been sitting in sunlight all day. Grizz put a paw on it and felt the faintest vibration, like a slow heartbeat deep inside. The tapping stopped again. The silence returned heavier than before. For a long moment, nothing moved. Even the shadows seemed to hold still. Then, just at the edge of the clearing, 3 shapes appeared. They were small, no taller than the first figure, and they stood side by side, perfectly still. Grizz couldn't see faces, only outlines, long arms, thin bodies, heads tilted in unison. Panda whispered, "They're watching." The shapes didn't move. The only sound now was the faint rustle of moss beneath the bear's feet. Then, one by one, the shapes slowly raised their arms and pointed all toward the silver ribbons in Grizz's paw. And before anyone could speak, every single ribbon began to hum. The humming from the silver ribbons grew stronger, a low, steady tone that seemed to vibrate in their chests. The 3 shapes at the edge of the clearing stayed perfectly still, arms still raised. Grizz swallowed hard. I think they want these back." Panda stepped closer to him. "Then I give them back." Ice Bear nodded once. "Do it." Grizz knelt by the stump and placed the ribbons gently on its surface. The moment they touched the wood, the humming stopped. The air shifted. A faint breeze, the first all night, brushed through the clearing, stirring the leaves overhead. Somewhere far away, an owl hooted. Then, as if a great weight had lifted, the forest began to breathe again. Crickets chirped. Frogs croaked by the stream. The silence melted away. When the bears looked up, the shapes were gone. No footsteps, no rustle, no sign they had ever been there. Only the stump remained. The ribbons vanished. Grizz let out a shaky laugh. "Okay, so mystery solved?" Panda shook his head. "Not solved. Just ended." East Bear glanced into the trees. "For now." They made their way back through the forest, the sounds of night wrapping around them like an old blanket. Oh, by the time they reached the cave, the moon had slipped behind the clouds. As they settled into their beds, the forest outside was alive again, almost as if nothing had happened. But in the deepest part of the woods, unseen in the shadows, 3 small shapes stood together, watching the cave from far away. And somewhere, hidden in the dark, a single, soft tap. Tap echoed once more. The night was calm over the forest. A gentle wind drifted through the trees, carrying the smell of damp leaves. The bear's treehouse glowed faintly in the moonlight, its windows warm and golden from the lamps inside. Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear were fast asleep. Grizz snored softly in his hammock. Panda curled up under a mountain of blankets, and Ice Bear lay perfectly still, like he always did, on his mat by the window. All was quiet. Then, without a sound, the moonlight outside shifted. The pale glow that lit the branches and leaves seemed to bend, and a shadow moved across the wall. It stretched long and thin, sliding toward the treehouse window. Inside, none of the bears stirred. The shadow reached the glass and paused, as though it were looking in. Its head tilted slowly, left, then right. Outside, the wind fell still. The only movement was the faint swaying of the tree. If anyone had been awake, they might have seen the faint outline of long fingers resting gently against the glass. They might have seen the shadow lean closer, its shape darkening as the moonlight dimmed further. But the bears kept sleeping. And then, as quietly as it came, the shadow turned away. It did not walk. It simply slipped back into the darkness, vanishing into the night. The wind returned, brushing against the branches. All seemed normal again. But if someone had looked carefully at the glass, they would have noticed a single, faint mark shaped like a hand still pressed against the window. Morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, spilling to the treehouse. Grizz stretched in his hammock with a loud yawn. Panda blinked blearily from under his blanket, and Ice Bear was already awake, sitting by the window. Grizz rubbed his eyes. Man, I slept great last night. Panda nodded, still half asleep. Me too. Dreamed I was at an all-you-can-eat bamboo buffet. Ice Bear didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the glass. Grizz hopped down. Hey, what's up? Ice Bear pointed. There, faint but clear in the morning light, was a print on the window, long fingers stretched wide, the palm pressed flat. Panda squinted. That's not yours, right? Ice Bear shook his head. Not mine. They all stared at it. The print wasn't smudgy like a paw pressed against glass. It was sharp, almost too sharp, like it had been left there with care. Maybe it's just from yesterday, Grizz suggested, though his voice wavered. Panda tilted his head. But we were inside all day yesterday. The three of them stood silently, the morning air suddenly feeling colder. Finally, Ice Bear leaned closer to the window. Something was here. Grizz tried to laugh it off, but his eyes kept flicking toward the trees outside. Panda wrapped his blanket tighter around himself. The handprint seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight, like there was still a trace of dew clinging to it. And if the bears had looked just a little longer, they might have noticed a second faint print lower on the glass, as though someone small had leaned there too. That evening, the bears decided to test the plan. Grizz paced the floor. All right, no sleeping tonight. We're going to catch whoever's been peeking in here. Panda was already curled up with a mug of tea. I'll try, but you know I'm not good at staying up late. Ice Bear sat by the window, silent, his eyes fixed on the branches outside. They turned off all the lamps, so the treehouse was lit only by the silvery glow of the moon. Shadows pooled in the corners, and the walls creaked quietly as the wind moved through the beams. Hours passed. The forest outside grew still again. Even crickets slowed their songs until there was almost no sound at all. Panda's eyes began to droop. Maybe it won't come back tonight, he murmured. Grizz nudged him. Stay with me, buddy. Just a little longer. Ice Bear's ears twitched. Something moving. They froze. Out in the trees, a faint shape was gliding between the trunks, not walking, just drifting. It stopped at the base of their tree, almost blending into the shadows. The bears held their breath. The shape began to rise, as though climbing, but they could hear no scraping of claws, no rustle of bark. It simply lifted higher until it reached the window. Panda's paw clutched Grizz's arm. It's looking in. The shadow leaned forward. In the dim moonlight, its head tilted left, then right, exactly as it had the night before. And then softly, as if it knew they were awake, it tapped once on the glass. The tap on the glass echoed in the quiet room. None of them moved at first. Then Grizz swallowed hard and whispered, Maybe. Maybe it just wants to say hi. Panda shook his head quickly. Or maybe it wants to eat us. Ice Bear's eyes stayed fixed on the figure, not moving. Grizz took a deep breath and stepped toward the window. His paw hovered over the latch. Okay, I'm going to open it. Just a little. Panda squeaked. Why? So we can find out what it is, Grizz whispered. With a soft click, the latch came loose. The window creaked as it opened a few inches, letting in the cold night air. The shadow didn't flinch. It just leaned closer, the faint outline of its head blocking the moonlight. Grizz cleared his throat. Hi. You've been, stopping by our window? No answer, not even a sound. Panda whispered, It's not saying anything. Ice Bear stepped forward. Look at its hands. In the pale light, They could see them now, long, thin fingers that seemed to bend slightly in the wrong places. One of those hands slowly reached forward, but stopped just short of the open window as though something was keeping it out. The figure tilted its head again, and for the briefest moment, its shape shimmered like a reflection on rippling water. Then, without warning, it pulled back. Not climbing down, simply drifting backward into the darkness until it was gone. The only thing left was the faint smell of damp leaves lingering in the room. The next night, the bears decided to keep watch again. But this time, they kept the window shut tight. Grizz sat in his hammock with a flashlight ready. Panda clutched a pillow to his chest, and Ice Bear stood silently by the door. The moonlight outside was dimmer tonight, hidden behind slow-moving clouds. Hours passed, and nothing happened. No tapping, no shadow, no sound but their own breathing. Panda yawned. Maybe it's gone for good. Grizz sighed. Yeah, maybe. A soft creak came from upstairs. The bears froze. All three of them looked toward the ladder that led up to the second level of the treehouse. They hadn't heard anyone climb it yet. The sound was unmistakable. Grizz whispered, We're all down here, right? Panda nodded quickly. Uh-huh. Ice Bear's gaze stayed fixed on the ladder. Something's upstairs. They moved together slowly, each step on the wooden floor seeming far too loud. The air felt heavier, colder, the way it had the first night. At the top of the ladder, the room was dark. Moonlight spilled in faintly through the window, and in that pale glow they saw it. The shadow was standing inside. It wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still in front of the very same window where they'd first seen it. Its head tilted left, then right. Then it slowly raised one hand and placed it flat against the glass from the inside. Panda's voice was barely a whisper. How did it get in? The shadow's hand stayed pressed against the glass. The bears stood frozen, unsure whether to move or speak. Grizz finally found his voice. Why? Are you here? The figure didn't answer, but slowly it turned its head toward them. Even in the dim light, they could feel its gaze, not sharp, not angry, just watchful. Ice Bear took a slow step forward. Not here to hurt us. The shadow tilted its head again, then lowered its hand from the glass. For a moment, it reached toward Grizz, palm open, as though offering something. But there was nothing there, only the faint outline of those long, strange fingers. Grizz hesitated, then held out his paw. Their shapes almost touched, but the shadow drew back, gliding toward the window. Before it passed through the glass, it paused. The moonlight brightened for just a second, and in that glow, the bears saw something they hadn't before. The faint outline of a small bear cub standing within the shadow, its form almost hidden inside the larger one. Then the shadow was gone, slipping into the night as quietly as mist, fading in the morning sun. The treehouse was still. Panda whispered. It wasn't. Alone? Grizz nodded slowly. Maybe it was just looking for someone. Ice Bear closed the window. Looking for home. They never saw the shadow again. But sometimes on nights when the wind is still and the moonlight feels just a little too bright, the bears find a faint handprint on the glass smaller than before and always facing inward. The morning light slips through the cave's window. Panda is curled up in his blanket burrito, mumbling something about 5 more minutes. Ice Bear sits on the edge of his bed, sipping tea with half-shut eyes. Grizz snores loudly, drooling on his pillow. Panda peeks out from his blanket. Panda, 5 more minutes. Grizz, make it 6. 6 is lucky. Ice Bear. Ice Bear has been awake since 5. Grizz stretches and yawns. As he sits up, he glances toward the ceiling and freezes. Grizz, hey, since when do we have footprints up there? Panda, footprints? All three look up. Muddy, shoe-shaped marks trail across the ceiling right above their beds. Ice bear. Not my size. Grizz grabs a broom and reaches upward. Grizz. Maybe it's just ceiling art? Panda. Who paints with dirt? The broom wobbles, nearly tipping Grizz over. Ice bear catches him before he falls. Ice bear. Ceiling structurally compromised. Bears should evacuate. Grizz. Or, adventure. They each imagine their own explanation. Grizz pictures a ninja raccoon running along the ceiling. Panda envisions stylish K-pop idols doing a choreographed routine. Ice Bear imagines a ladder installation gone wrong. Determined to investigate, they head toward the storage area. Ice Bear opens a small hatch. Ice Bear made attic, for emergency cheese storage. It's cramped and dusty, cobwebs hanging low. Panda sneezes. Panda. Why is it always dusty in these situations? Grizz spots a fresh, muddy footprint on the attic floor, leading to the far wall, then straight up onto the ceiling beam. Grizz. Whoa. Something small and shadowy skitters into the darkness. Ice Bear. Not cheese. Grizz squints into the dark corner. Grizz. Did you see that? Panda. Please tell me it was a dust bunny. Ice Bear. Dust bunnies do not leave muddy footprints. Grizz crawls toward the beam. The wood creaks under his weight, making Panda flinch. Panda, careful. I am too young to be buried under a collapsed ceiling. Grizz, relax. I've done way riskier things. Remember the trampoline in the tree incident? Ice Bear, Tree 1. They reach the far end of the attic, but the shadowy thing is gone. Only a faint trail of footprints remains, heading toward a tiny gap in the wall. Grizz, went through there? Panda, that's like mouse size. Ice Bear. Ice Bear can fit. Ice Bear somehow squeezes halfway into the gap. There's a muffled sound, then he slowly backs out, holding a single muddy sneaker. Grizz. That's a shoe? Panda. Whose shoe? Before they can answer, there's a sudden thump from the bedroom below. They scramble back down through the hatch. In the bedroom, more fresh footprints now trail from the ceiling toward the far wall, as if something walked down across the wall and back up again. Panda. Okay, I am officially creeped out. Grizz. I am officially excited. Mystery level maximum. Grizz bolts for the ladder leading to the roof. Panda and Ice Bear follow reluctantly. They pop out into the cool morning air and find nothing unusual. Just the quiet forest stretching out around them. Then from somewhere behind the cave comes a faint squeak. Grizz. That's it? Let's go. Panda. Or, we could not go. That's also an option. Ice Bear. Too late. Bears are going. They rush toward the sound, weaving through the trees until they find a trail of muddy shoe prints leading deeper into the forest. Grizz grins. Grizz. Whoever's making those ceiling prints is out here. Panda. And probably watching this right now. Ice Bear. Ice Bear feels eyes. The camera pans to the shadows between the trees. A pair of tiny, glowing eyes blink, then vanish. The bears follow the muddy shoe prints into the deeper forest. The air feels cooler. The trees packed tight. Panda, I don't like how horror movies start like this. Grizz. This isn't a horror movie. It's an adventure movie. Ice Bear. Adventure movies still have jump scares. A branch snaps ahead. All three bears freeze. Out from behind a tree, a small figure steps into view, a raccoon, wearing one muddy sneaker. Grizz. I knew it. Ninja raccoon theory confirmed. Panda. Wait. Why is it wearing a shoe? Ice Bear. Raccoon has fashion sense. The raccoon looks at them, then scurries up a tree with surprising speed. Grizz takes off after it, weaving between trees. Panda lags behind, complaining about cardio. Ice Bear moves silently, somehow appearing ahead of the raccoon at the base of the next tree. The raccoon freezes, squeaks, and drops a small object from its mouth, a rolled-up piece of paper. Grizz, a clue. Panda, or garbage. 90% chance of garbage. Ice Bear, garbage can still be clue. They unroll the paper. It's a rough, childish drawing of the bear's bedroom ceiling, with little stick figures walking upside down. Panda, this is so weird. Grizz, this is so awesome. Ice Bear. Ice Bear prefers normal awesome. Before they can question the raccoon, it leaps into the branches above and disappears, heading back toward the cave. Grizz, it's going home. Panda, our home. Ice Bear. Bears must defend cave. They run back through the forest, bursting into the bedroom, only to find fresh, muddy prints crisscrossing the ceiling again, more than before. One print is directly above Panda's pillow. Panda, okay. I'm sleeping in the fridge tonight. Grizz, or we stay up and catch it in the act. Ice Bear. Ice Bear will make snacks. The three bears grab sleeping bags and set up camp in the middle of the room, eyes glued to the ceiling. Outside, the sun dips, and the cave grows darker. From above, a faint creak. The bears sit in a triangle of sleeping bags, each holding a flashlight. The cave is quiet except for the occasional cricket outside. Panda, I'm already sleepy. Can we just catch it tomorrow? Grizz, no way. This is our big detective moment. Ice Bear. Ice Bear will remain alert. Hours pass. Panda starts nodding off. Grizz munches loudly on popcorn. Ice Bear just stares straight up, not blinking once. Then, a faint tap, tap, tap from above. All three bears snap their heads upward. From the shadows, something small and sneaker-clad pokes out from a corner of the ceiling. It's the raccoon, but it's wearing both sneakers now, walking calmly upside down as if gravity doesn't apply. Panda, what? Grizz, oh my gosh! It's like a superhero move. Ice Bear, raccoon is disrespecting physics. The raccoon looks down at them, grins, as much as a raccoon can, then casually hangs upside down by its tail. It's holding another rolled-up paper. Grizz jumps up to grab it, but the raccoon flips backward and scurries away along the ceiling, leaving fresh, muddy prints in its path. The bears leap into action. Grizz climbs onto Ice Bear's shoulders. Panda tries to chase with a broom. They end up bumping into each other and falling into a heap. Panda, worst stakeout ever. Grizz, or best. Did you see that ceiling walk? Ice Bear saw, will not unsee. On the floor beside them lies the new paper the raccoon dropped. It's another drawing, but this time it's of a treehouse marked with a big red X at the top. Grizz, this is it. It's telling us where it lives. Panda, or where it wants to lure us so it can steal our stuff. Ice Bear. Bears will take chance. They decide to follow the clue in the morning. The raccoon, now barely visible in the corner of the ceiling, watches them with a curious tilt of its head before disappearing into the darkness above. Morning sunlight pours into the cave. Grizz is already pacing, holding the raccoon's map like a treasure hunter. Grizz, today's the day we find out why a raccoon's been breakdancing on our ceiling. Panda, please don't call it that. It makes it sound less creepy. Ice Bear, ceiling raccoon is creepy regardless. They head into the forest, following the doodled path from the map. The trail winds past a small stream and through thick patches of ferns until they reach a giant old oak. Up in its highest branches sits a wobbly, patched-together treehouse. Grizz, that's gotta be it. Panda, no way I'm climbing up there. I'm fragile. Ice Bear, Ice Bear will carry Panda. Before Panda can protest, Ice Bear hoists him over one shoulder and starts climbing. Grizz scrambles up after them. They reach the rickety platform where the raccoon is waiting, with a whole group of other forest animals, squirrels, birds, a fox, and even a turtle wearing a tiny backpack. Panda: "Are we interrupting something?" Grizz: "This is amazing. It's like a secret club." Ice Bear: "Ice Bear sees snacks." The animals shuffle aside to reveal the inside of the treehouse walls, covered in drawings. Every single one is of the bear's cave, ceiling included. But in each drawing, the bears are upside down, walking on the ceiling just like the raccoon. Panda: "Why do we look so weird?" Grizz: "I think they're inviting us." Ice Bear: "Ice Bear suspects training montage." The raccoon hands Grizz a small belt with sticky pads on the feet. It mimics putting it on and walking upside down. Panda: "Nope, no thank you." Grizz: "Yes, absolutely yes." Ice Bear: "Ice Bear will attempt." Grizz straps it on and takes a wobbly step onto the ceiling of the treehouse. He sticks, then promptly flips upside down, dangling awkwardly while laughing. Panda hides his face in embarrassment. The raccoon chatters excitedly, pointing toward the forest trail again, as if urging them to follow for the real upside-down walk. Grizz: "Guys, I think this is just the beginning." Panda: "I was afraid you'd say that." Ice Bear: "Bears proceed." The raccoon leads the bears along a winding forest path until they arrive at a strange wooden tunnel built between two tall trees. The walls and roof inside are painted to look like a nighttime sky. Grizz: "Whoa, this is like a raccoon amusement park." Panda: "I don't think we're tall enough for this ride." Ice Bear: "Bears meet height requirement." The raccoon points upward. Running along the tunnel ceiling are tiny planks fitted with the same sticky pad material from the belt. Forest animals scurry up and begin walking upside down like it's the most natural thing in the world. Grizz, still wearing his sticky belt gear, hops onto the ceiling and starts walking clumsily. Panda groans but gets pulled up by Ice Bear, who joins with perfect balance. As they shuffle forward, the tunnel opens into a big upside-down platform, like a miniature forest village suspended from the treetops. Lanterns hang up toward the forest floor, making the whole place feel like a floating dream. Grizz: "This is incredible." Panda: "My stomach disagrees." Ice Bear approves of you. In the center, the raccoon shows them a drawing. A storm cloud over the bear's cave, water flooding the floor, while the bears hang safely from the ceiling. Panda: "Wait. You've been practicing ceiling walking to save us?" Grizz: "Ceiling hero raccoon." Ice Bear: "Noble intentions, poor sneaker hygiene." The raccoon points at the muddy shoes, then at the footprints in the drawings, chattering proudly. It seems the ceiling walks in their cave were just training runs to prepare the bears for emergencies. They spend the afternoon learning to walk upside down. Grizz races squirrels. Ice Bear perfects quiet ceiling flips. Panda manages 2 steps before hanging like a tired sloth. Back at the cave that night, the bears lie in bed looking up at the familiar ceiling footprints. Panda: "You know, it's kind of nice knowing why they're there." Grizz: "Yeah, it's like we're part of a secret team now." Ice Bear still wants ceiling cleaned. Somewhere above, a small muddy footprint appears, fresh and just a little crooked. The raccoon squeaks softly from the shadows. It's a warm summer night in the bear's cave. Panda is sprawled on his bed, scrolling through his phone. Ice Bear is knitting quietly, and Grizz is bouncing a rubber ball against the wall. Panda: "Can you not do that? It's not relaxing." Grizz: "But I'm bored." Ice Bear recommends reading. The cave lights flicker. Panda frowns. Panda, did we forget to pay the power bill? Grizz, nah, I think it's, before he can finish. Tiny golden lights drift in from the cave entrance. Fireflies, dozens, then hundreds, float inside, their glow soft and warm. Panda, okay? That's actually relaxing. Ice Bear. Fireflies are organized. The fireflies swirl in slow patterns, almost like they're writing something in the air. The bears watch, hypnotized. Grizz, do you hear that? Panda, hear what? Ice Bear whispering. They all lean in. Faint, overlapping murmurs fill the air, coming from the fireflies themselves. Panda, are they talking? Grizz, or singing? Ice Bear. Ice Bear says both. One group of fireflies drifts toward the back wall of the cave, arranging themselves into a glowing arrow pointing deeper inside. Grizz, guess they want us to follow. Panda, guess I want to stay right here. Ice Bear, bears will follow. The fireflies drift ahead like a golden river, leading into the shadows at the far end of the cave. The bears step carefully after the glowing trail. Panda keeps glancing back toward the warm safety of their beds. Panda, just so we're clear, if this turns into a horror movie, I'm the one who warned you. Grizz, relax. It's nature magic. Ice Bear, magic can still eat you. The fireflies drift around a jagged crack in the wall. Grizz crouches and squeezes through first, then Ice Bear, and finally a very reluctant Panda. They emerge into a massive hidden chamber, its walls shimmering faintly. More fireflies fill the air here, swirling like a galaxy in slow motion. Panda, whoa. Okay, this is worth the risk. Grizz, told you. Ice Bear. Ice Bear approves. As they stand there, the whispering grows clearer. It's still too soft to make out words, but the tone feels welcoming. The fireflies form loose shapes in the air, trees, rivers, even little glowing bears. Panda. Are they telling us a story? Grizz. A firefly story? Ice Bear. Bears should listen. They sit down on the smooth rock floor. The light show shifts, now showing a cave just like theirs, but with strange symbols glowing along the walls. The whispers rise and fall, almost like a chant. Suddenly, the fireflies all pause mid-air. Every light turns toward a dark tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Panda, oh no. Grizz, oh yes. Ice Bear. Bears are being summoned. From the tunnel, a faint blue glow begins to pulse. The fireflies scatter, forming a path. Grizz charges ahead, practically bouncing down the tunnel. Panda lingers at the entrance. Panda, you guys ever think about how curiosity kills? Ice Bear. Ice Bear thinks about snacks. They walk deeper until the cave walls narrow, the blue light growing brighter with each step. The whispers of the fireflies fade, replaced by a soft hum, like a faraway engine. They step into a small cavern, and in the center sits a glowing pool of water. The light isn't coming from the water itself, but from dozens of fireflies hovering just above the surface. These ones glowing deep blue instead of gold. Grizz. Whoa. Fancy edition fireflies. Panda, this feels like a secret we're not supposed to see. Ice Bear. Ice Bear sees everything. The blue fireflies drift down toward the pool, touching the surface. Ripples spread and shapes begin to appear in the reflection. Mountains, a river, and their own cave, but with a massive storm cloud hanging above it. Panda. Is that supposed to be the weather forecast? Grizz. Maybe it's a warning. Ice Bear, or invitation. The image shifts. Now 3 glowing bear shapes walk through the storm, completely surrounded by fireflies. Panda, okay. That's definitely us. Grizz. We're like the chosen ones. Ice Bear. Ice Bear feels pressure. The pool suddenly ripples hard, sending a light mist into the air. The blue fireflies scatter into the tunnel behind them. The golden ones from before reappear, circling the bears urgently before heading back toward the main cave. Grizz, I think they want us to get ready for whatever that was. Panda, I think they want us to move to a less haunted cave. Ice Bear, bears will prepare. They follow the fireflies back through the hidden chamber, the whispers now faster, almost anxious. Audit. The bears squeeze back through the crack into their familiar living space. Only it's not quite familiar anymore. The air shimmers faintly, and golden fireflies drift in thick swirls, covering the ceiling and walls, even their beds. Panda. Guys, did we just walk into a snow globe? Grizz. This is awesome. Our cave is like a magical lantern now. Ice Bear. Ceiling has never looked better. The fireflies' whispers are louder, almost layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once, but still too soft to understand. Grizz moves closer, holding his ear toward a cluster of them. Grizz, I think they're telling us to stay inside. Panda, that or welcome to the swarm. Outside, a low rumble echoes through the forest. A wind pushes through the entrance, and the fireflies pulse brighter in unison, forming what looks like a protective dome of light. Panda, oh no. Grizz, oh yes, it's starting. Ice Bear. Ice Bear will secure snacks. They gather in the middle of the room as the fireflies swirl tighter and tighter, making shapes in midair, now clearly forming waves and rain, lightning bolts striking dangerously close to the outline of the cave. Panda. So that blue pool thing was a forecast. Grizz. We're totally ready. Ice Bear. Ice Bear is always ready. The first drops of real rain patter outside, then a flash of lightning illuminates the forest. The firefly's light holds steady, as if defying the storm. The whispers change, slower now, deep and resonant, almost like a chant. Grizz glances at his brothers. Grizz, whatever's coming, we've got the best nightlight ever. Panda, best nightlight that talks, still weird. The rumble outside grows into a roar, and the fireflies suddenly shift toward the entrance as if bracing for something. Thunder cracks so loud it rattles the shelves. Rain lashes against the cave entrance in thick sheets. The golden fireflies hold their dome of light, shimmering brighter each time lightning flashes. Panda, I don't think this is just a regular storm. Grizz, definitely not regular, definitely cool. Ice Bear, definitely dangerous. The wind howls and something flickers in the shadows outside, dark shapes moving between the trees, not animals. More like swirls of black mist with glowing eyes. Panda, nope, nope. Grizz, whoa. Storm spirits? Ice Bear. Ice Bear calls them trouble. The fireflies tighten their formation, buzzing faster. The whispers sharpen into a rhythm, like a chant, and a warm wave of light pushes outward, making the shadowy shapes recoil. One particularly large shape lunges forward, stretching into the entrance. A surge of blue light streaks through the golden swarm. Blue fireflies from the pool, joining the dome and blasting the shape backward into the storm. Panda, okay. Officially magical. Grizz, and officially awesome. Ice Bear approves of teamwork. The fireflies keep pulsing, each wave of light pushing the storm and its shadows farther away. Inside, the bears huddle together, watching in awe as the swarm holds the line. Finally, the rumble begins to fade. The black mist shapes vanish into the trees, and the rain softens to a gentle drizzle. The golden dome slowly dissolves, fireflies drifting lazily back into the air. Grizz, we just survived a magical storm battle. Panda, and we didn't even have to leave the cave. Ice Bear, fireflies did heavy lifting. One blue firefly hovers close to Panda's face, its hum soft and friendly before darting back toward the crack in the wall. The swarm follows as if inviting the bears to come one more time. The bears follow the drifting fireflies back through the crack in the wall into the vast, hidden chamber. The golden and blue swarms gather above the glowing pool, hovering like a living chandelier. Panda, okay? Do we finally get to know what all the whispering was about? Grizz, yeah. Spill the firefly tea. Ice Bear, tea should be chamomile. The blue fireflies dip toward the pool, touching the surface. This time the ripples are calm, forming clear shapes. First the bears, then their cave, then the swirling storm from earlier. But the image changes. Now it shows the bears surrounded by fireflies, the cave glowing warm, the forest peaceful. The whispers grow soft, almost like a lullaby. Panda, they're saying, we're safe? Grizz, and maybe they'll always come back if we need them. Ice Bear, fireflies on call. A few golden fireflies land gently on each bear's paw, glowing brighter for a moment before lifting away. It feels like a tiny handshake. The swarms begin to disperse, streaming toward the cracks and tunnels, fading into the forest night. The blue ones sink slowly into the pool, vanishing like drops of ink in water. Back in their main cave, the bears settle in for the night. The storm has completely cleared, leaving the air fresh and still. A few lone fireflies drift lazily near the ceiling, their glow soft and steady. Panda, I think I'm going to miss the whispers. Grizz, nah, they'll be back. Ice Bear saved some snacks for them. The camera pans up toward the dim, glowing dots overhead. One flickers just a little brighter, almost like it's saying good night, before the screen fades to black. It's a lazy afternoon in the cave. Panda's on the couch with his phone. Grizz is building a tower out of snack boxes, and Ice Bear is sweeping the floor. Panda, this is the perfect day for doing nothing. Grizz, correction. Doing nothing while stacking snack boxes. Ice Bear prefers sweeping. Grizz finishes his tower and steps back to admire it. In the big front window's reflection, the tower looks perfect, except there's someone standing next to it. A tall, fuzzy shape, smiling and waving. Grizz, hey Panda, Ice Bear? You, see that? Panda, see what? Ice Bear, see nothing unusual. Grizz points at the window. They all look, but in the actual room, no one's there. In the reflection, though, the figure is still waving. Panda, okay, that's not normal. Grizz, maybe it's like a friendly ghost? Ice Bear recommends evacuation. The figure in the reflection holds up a sign that says, hi. Then it drops the sign and points toward the forest outside. Panda, I don't like where this is going. Grizz, I love where this is going. Ice Bear, bears are going. The bears step outside. The forest is calm, nothing unusual. When they look back at the window from outside, their own reflections are there, but no mysterious figure. Panda, so only in the reflection from inside the cave? Grizz, guess we're going to have to go back in. Ice Bear is bringing broom. They head back inside. The figure is still there in the window reflection, now holding up a new sign. Follow. Grizz walks right up to the window, waving at the fuzzy figure in the reflection. Grizz, hey buddy, how do we follow you if you're only in here? The figure in the reflection points toward the far side of the cave, then makes a walking motion with its hands. Panda, is it telling us to walk that way? Ice Bear sees no harm. Yet. They start walking slowly across the room, watching the reflection instead of the real cave. In the reflection, the figure leads them to the back wall. But in real life, they're just standing next to Ice Bear's spare fridge. Panda, now what? The figure mimes pulling something. Grizz looks around, then grabs the fridge handle. Panda, no, don't open. The fridge door swings wide, revealing not shelves or snacks, but a shimmering wall of light inside. Grizz, whoa, portal fridge. Ice Bear. Ice Bear keeps ice cream in other fridge. The figure in the reflection waves for them to step in. Panda shakes his head furiously. Panda, nope, no way, not doing it. Grizz is already halfway through. Grizz, come on, it's adventure time. Ice Bear picks Panda up like a suitcase and follows. The light swallows them, and suddenly they're standing in a quiet meadow, except when they turn around, there's no fridge, no cave, just open grass, and a single old-fashioned mirror standing upright. In the mirror's reflection, their fuzzy friend is there, smiling, waving them forward again. Panda. This is officially the weirdest day of my life. Ice Bear. Ice Bear has seen weirder. The bears follow the mirror friend's gestures across the meadow. The grass rustles softly, but there's no wind. Scattered here and there are other mirrors, some small, some taller than Grizz. Panda, is this a mirror farm? Grizz, I don't know, but it's awesome. Ice Bear. Ice Bear sees infinite potential for selfies. As they walk, each mirror shows something different. Their cave, the forest, the city, and sometimes places they've never seen before. In one, Panda spots the reflection friend walking beside them, even though in real life there's no one there. Panda, there it is again. Why can't we see it for real? Grizz, maybe it's shy. Ice Bear, or trapped. They stop at the tallest mirror where the reflection friend points to a strange cloud-like shimmer at the edge of the meadow. It then mimes, pulling again, as if urging them to open something invisible. Grizz steps forward and reaches out his paw, touches a surface like cool glass, even though nothing's there. The air ripples. The ripple spreads like water, and the reflection friend steps out of the mirror in the reflection. But not in reality. They can still only see it in the glassy surface, even though it's clearly moving around them. Panda, okay. That's creepy and amazing at the same time. Grizz, I think it's leading us through. Ice Bear. Bears should proceed with caution. They step into the ripple. Instantly, the meadow fades, and they're standing in a strange upside-down version of their cave's same furniture, same walls, but everything mirrored. The windows show a reversed forest, with the sun setting in the east instead of the west. The reflection friend appears in the window again, this time closer than ever, holding up a sign. Help! Panda, I knew there was a catch. Grizz, don't worry, buddy. We got you. Ice Bear. Ice Bear has no plan yet. The friend points to the mirrored fridge. Inside, instead of food, there's a swirling gray mist. The friend motions for the bears to push the fridge. Together, they shove it toward the window. As it moves, the mist inside swirls faster, sending cold air through the mirrored cave. Panda, are we sure we should be pushing the scary mist closer to us? Grizz, it's fine. Adventure logic. Ice Bear, logic unclear. When the fridge reaches the window, the friend presses its paw against the glass. The mist starts flowing out through the reflection, dissipating into the mirrored forest. The cave grows warmer, the glass stops rattling, and the friend visibly relaxes. He picks up a new sign. Thank you. Grizz. No problem, pal. Anytime. Panda. So we risked our lives for a haunted refrigerator? Ice Bear. Haunted fridge now safe. The friend waves, then points back toward the rippled doorway. The bears nod and step through. They stumble out of the fridge in their real cave, blinking in the familiar light. The reflection in the window is normal. No extra figures, no waving friend. Panda, so we're just back? Grizz. Yeah, but... He points at the window. For just a moment, their fuzzy friend appears again in the reflection, giving them a thumbs up before fading away. Ice Bear. Friend says goodbye. Panda. Or, see you later. Grizz, I hope it's see you later. They flop onto the couch. Outside, the forest is calm. In the reflection of the window, there's only the three of them until a faint paw print appears in the glass and glows for a moment before disappearing. Panda. Okay. That's actually kind of sweet. Ice Bear. Ice Bear will keep window clean. Fade out. Grizz tosses another log onto the campfire. The flames dance high, crackling warm. They finish their snacks, yawn, and start getting ready for bed. But when Grizz goes to put out the fire, it flares even brighter. Grizz. Okay. Guess you're not done yet. Panda. Maybe it's just stubborn. Ice Bear. Fire feels alive. The flames suddenly flicker in a pattern, almost like they're waving. No matter how much dirt Ice Bear tosses on it, the fire refuses to dim. It pops loudly, sending a spark spiraling into the air. The spark drifts toward Panda and hangs there for a moment, before bursting into tiny, glowing motes. Panda, did the fire just wink at me? Grizz, I think it's trying to say something. Ice Bear, fire wants company. The bears decide to stay up a little longer. Each time they talk, the fire's flames sway toward them, crackling happily. When they fall silent, the fire dims slightly. Panda, okay. So it likes it when we're awake. Grizz, that's cute. But we need sleep. Ice Bear. Ice Bear suggests negotiation. Grizz leans toward the flames. Grizz, hey, campfire buddy, can we sleep now? The fire flickers, then sways side to side, almost like shaking its head no. They try telling it stories, thinking maybe it wants entertainment. Panda starts with a spooky ghost story, but the fire's flames shrink. Panda, guess it doesn't like scary stuff. Grizz, let me try. Grizz tells a silly story about a bear who got stuck in a hammock. The fire flares bright and tosses sparks into the air like applause. Ice Bear tells a short, calm tale about a snowfield under the moon. The flames settle into a slow, steady flicker. Panda is listening to us. Ice Bear. Fire wants happy endings. They spend hours chatting, laughing, and telling gentle stories. The fire seems completely content, but it still won't go out. As the moon rises high, the fire shapes itself into brief images in the flames, three little bears around a smaller fire, all smiling. Panda, is it showing us? Grizz. And it wants us to keep it company forever. Ice Bear. Ice Bear cannot camp forever. The fire then flickers into the shape of a crescent moon and tilts as if nodding toward the sky. Panda. Maybe it only wants us to stay up until the moon reaches a certain spot. Grizz. That's kind of sweet. Ice Bear. Bears can do that. They keep talking softly, watching the moon slide toward the horizon. The fire stays warm and calm, almost humming. When the moon reaches the exact spot from the fire's image, the flames suddenly grow brighter one last time. Sparks drift upward in a slow, graceful spiral, lighting the trees in a gentle glow. The bears look at each other. Panda, I think this is it. Grizz, okay. Ready? Ice Bear. Good night, fire. They all say good night together. The flames flicker in what feels like a happy sigh, then slowly shrink down to glowing embers. By morning, the fire pit is cool, but the coals are arranged in a perfect heart shape. Panda, that's adorable. Grizz, best camping buddy ever. Ice Bear, fire made art. As they pack up, Panda glances back at the empty fire pit. A single spark flickers to life for just a moment before fading. Panda, think we'll see it again? Grizz, oh yeah. Fires like that don't forget. Ice Bear, bears will bring marshmallows. They head down the trail, the morning sun bright behind them, and the camera lingers on the fire pit just long enough to catch a faint, warm glow beneath the ashes. Fade out. The cave was warm that night. Grizz was snoring in the middle of his blanket fort. Ice Bear lay curled up with a tiny candle flickering beside him, and Panda was half asleep, hugging his phone to his chest like it was a stuffed toy. Outside, the moonlight slipped over the trees like silver paint. The wind made the pine branches sway, but inside the cave it was nothing but cozy breathing and the occasional rustle of blankets. Ice Bear stirred first. His eyes opened just enough to see the candle's flame quiver. It wasn't the kind of flicker you get from a draft. It was more like the flame shivered. He blinked once, twice, and then closed his eyes again, too tired to care. Panda mumbled in his sleep. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more. Grizz rolled onto his back, mumbling something about pancakes. The 3 brothers were the picture of sleepy cuteness until the sound came. It was soft at first. So soft that it could have been mistaken for the wind, a whistle. Not like the happy kind you hear when someone's working. It was low, hollow, and slow, like someone breathing through an empty bottle. Oh, oh! Ice Bear's eyes opened again. He didn't move, just listened. Panda's ears twitched under his blanket. Grizz rolled over and mumbled, "Hey, you hear that?" The whistle came again, a little closer. Panda pulled his blanket up to his chin. "It's just the wind, right?" he whispered. But Ice Bear didn't answer. He sat up, the candlelight making his fur look like tiny gold threads. "Not wind," he said simply. Outside, the trees leaned, their shadows stretching into the cave entrance. The brothers huddled together, still wrapped in their blankets. No one wanted to admit it, but they all heard the same thing. The hollow whistle, drifting between the trees. They peeked toward the entrance. Moonlight spilled across the forest floor, and something just at the edge of the shadows seemed to be moving. Not fast, not slow, just there. Grizz forced a smile. "Okay. It's probably, a raccoon with a flute, or maybe a nightbird." But the whistle came again, and it was definitely not a raccoon. Ice Bear stood, candle in paw. "We should see." And even though Panda whispered, "Nope, nope, nope," they all shuffled to the cave entrance, still wrapped in their blankets, looking like 3 little burritos peeking out into the silver night. The sound stopped. The forest was silent. Then from somewhere beyond the trees, "Ho!" The brothers exchanged a look. Grizz took a step forward. That was the moment, though they didn't know it yet, when the night began to change. The air outside the cave was cool, the kind that made their noses twitch. The moon sat low, glowing like a pale lantern over the forest. Grizz still had his blanket around his shoulders. Ice Bear carried the little candle, and Panda was carrying a pillow. "For comfort," he insisted. They stepped onto the soft pine needles, the ground muffling their steps. Somewhere far ahead, the hollow whistle drifted through the trees again. "Oh! Oh!" Slow, patient, almost as if it was waiting for them. The brothers kept close together. Every now and then the wind would move the branches and scatter moonlight across the ground, making it look like silver raindrops had frozen mid-fall. Panda whispered, "I don't like how quiet it is." Ice Bear replied, "Quiet means listening." They passed the old stump where squirrels sometimes hid their acorns. Tonight there were no squirrels, just a small glass jar sitting on top of the stump. Inside it, something faintly glowed like a firefly that wasn't moving. Grizz tilted his head. "Was this here before?" No one answered, but Panda clutched his pillow tighter. Ice Bear's candle flame bent toward the jar as if it wanted to see inside. The whistle came again, closer now. The glow inside the jar pulsed once. Then they heard another sound. Not a whistle this time, but the crunch of footsteps in the leaves ahead. The brothers froze. The footsteps stopped too. Grizz cleared his throat softly. Hello, we come in peace? The forest didn't answer, only the slow whistle. Now so near it felt like it was weaving between the trees just a few steps away. They walked on, drawn by curiosity and something else they couldn't name. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. A tree stood split in two, yet both halves leaned toward each other like they were whispering secrets. A ring of mushrooms glowed faintly in the grass, their light barely enough to touch the tips of the bear's paws. And all around, shadows that didn't quite match the shape of the branches above. Panda whispered, "Maybe we should go back." But when they turned, the path behind them looked different. The trees were closer together, their trunks lined with thin scratches like someone had traced them with a needle. The whistle sounded again right in front of them now. The bears stepped into a small clearing. The moonlight pooled here like silver water, and in the middle was an old wooden chair, empty. The sound had stopped. Even the wind had stopped. Ice Bear set candle on the ground. Grizz stepped forward cautiously. Panda, peeking from behind them, whispered, "Who's supposed to be sitting there?" The answer came not in word, but in the faintest movement. From the corner of the clearing, just beyond the moonlight, a shape leaned out. Small, still, watching. And somewhere in the dark, the whistle began, again slow, hollow, and patient. The three bears stood at the edge of the clearing, their paws almost touching the moonlit grass. The chair sat in the middle, perfectly still, as if it had been waiting for them for a very, very long time. The shape in the shadows didn't move closer. It just tilted its head, as though studying them. Panda whispered, "I think it's small. Maybe it's a kid." Grizz whispered back, "Or maybe it's a forest animal." Ice Bear said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the chair. The hollow whistle drifted through the trees again. But this time, it didn't seem to come from one direction. It curled around them, above them, between the leaves. Like the forest itself was breathing. Grizz took one careful step forward. His paw touched the moonlight, and the glow in the clearing shimmered, just slightly, like ripples in a silver pond. The shape in the shadow stepped back. Panda clutched his pillow tighter. Wait, we don't even know what it is." But Grizz kept walking until he stood right beside the chair. Up close, it wasn't just any chair. The wood was old but smooth, like it had been touched 1,000 times. Carved into the arms were tiny patterns, swirls, stars, and eyes. Lots of Grizz reached out to touch one of the carving. The whistle stopped. The forest fell into complete stillness. Ice Bear joined him in the moonlight, placing the candle on the seat of the chair. The flame wavered, then leaned toward the shadowy edge of the clearing as though pointing. The shape stepped out. Small paws, round ears, a tiny nose that twitched in the light. It was a bear cub, but not like any cub they had seen before. Its fur was pale, almost the same color as the moon, and its eyes were a soft, glassy silver. The cub didn't speak. It just watched them with a look that was part curious, part longing. Panda's voice was barely a whisper. "It's cute." The cub tilted its head again, then turned toward the trees. It looked back once, as if inviting them to follow. The hollow whistle began again, but now it was softer, slower, almost kind. The three brothers glanced at each other. Grizz nodded. Ice Bear picked up the candle. Panda hugged his pillow. They stepped out of the clearing, following the pale cub into the deeper forest. And somewhere above, the moon slipped behind a cloud, dimming the path just enough to make them wonder. Were they following the cub? Or was the cub leading them somewhere they were meant to go? The pale cub moved ahead of them, its paws making no sound on the pine needles. Even when the ground dipped or the roots twisted across their path, it never stumbled. Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear followed close, their blankets and pillow still clutched against the cool night air. The forest looked different here. The trees stood taller, their trunks darker, and their branches hung low like curtains. Between them, the air shimmered faintly like heat waves on a summer road, except it wasn't warm at all. The hollow whistle drifted through the branches, still soft, still slow. But now, there was something under it. A faint hum, so quiet you could only hear it if you held your breath. Panda paused and glanced back. The path behind them had vanished. The trees had closed in, leaving no way to see where they'd come from. He whispered, "We're not in the same forest anymore, are we?" Ice Bear replied, "Forest changes at night." They followed the cub to a fallen log, wide enough for all three of them to cross at once. Halfway over, Grizz noticed something carved into the wood swirls, stars and eyes, just like the chair in the clearing. The eyes in the carving seemed to glimmer faintly in the candlelight. Beyond the log was a small meadow. The grass was silver white, moving gently as if brushed by an unseen hand. In the center stood a crooked lamppost. No road, no fence, just a lamppost, its light glowing the same pale color as the cub's fur. The cub stopped beneath it and looked back at them. Grizz stepped into the meadow first. Panda hesitated at the edge, the silver grass tickling his paws. "This feels like a dream," he whispered. Ice Bear simply nodded. Dreams can be true. When all three reached the lamppost, the cub sat down. The hollow whistle stopped completely. The silence was so deep, they could hear the soft creak of the lamppost swaying. Then, a voice, not spoken aloud but inside their heads, as gentle as a lullaby. "You followed the sound. Few ever do." Panda blinked. "Wait, did you hear that too?" Grizz glanced at the cub. "Was that you?" The cub didn't answer with the words. It just looked up at the lamppost light. The light began to grow brighter, but not in a harsh way. It spread like warm milk in tea, filling the meadow and brushing over the bear's fur. In that glow, Grizz thought he saw shadows moving, shapes of other animals, all pale like the cub, watching from the edges of the meadow. Ice Bear's eyes reflected the light. "Not alone," he said softly. The cub stood, turned toward a dark archway formed by two bent trees at the far end of the meadow, and began walking. The arch wasn't there a moment ago. Grizz took a deep breath. "Well, guess we're going in." Panda hugged his pillow even tighter. And as they stepped toward the arch, the whistle returned so close now it felt like it was coming from just beyond the trees. The archway of trees was so low the brothers had to duck to pass through. On the other side, the air felt different, softer, like stepping into a room filled with warm breath. The ground was covered in moss that glowed faintly under their paws. Above, the branches intertwined into a ceiling, and thin threads of mist floated between them like ribbons. The pale cub padded ahead, pausing now and then to glance back, making sure they were still following. Somewhere in this hidden place, the hollow whistle rose again, louder now, but not in a frightening way. It was deep and round, almost like a slow song. Grizz whispered, "It's close, really close." Panda whispered back, I'm not sure I want to see what it is. Ice Bear's voice was calm. Better to know. They rounded a bend in the mossy path, and then they saw it. In the middle of a small grove stood a tree unlike any they had seen before. Its bark was smooth and pale, almost silver. From its branches hung dozens of hollow shapes, shells, acorns, bits of carved wood, even tiny bottles. The wind that passed through them made the sound, the hollow whistle. Each note was soft and round, drifting through the grove like a lullaby for the forest. The pale cub walked up to the tree and pressed its nose to the trunk. The tree's surface seemed to ripple, just slightly, as though it recognized the touch. The brothers stepped closer, listening. Some of the whistles were low, some high, each with a different timbre. Grizz smiled faintly. It's like the trees playing itself. Oh, Panda tilted his head. But why? For what? A soft voice, the same they'd heard in the meadow, filled their minds again. To guide the lost. They looked around. More pale shapes stood at the edge of the grove, foxes, raccoons, owls, all watching quietly. The voice continued. Every sound leads someone here. Every whistle carries a dreamer to this place. The cub glanced at them and took a step closer, as if inviting them to touch the tree. Grizz reached out first. His paw met the smooth surface, and instantly a low, warm note rang out. Ice Bear placed his paw next to Grizz's, and a second note joined the first, weaving together like two threads in a blanket. Panda hesitated, then touched the bark too. The three notes blended into a slow, steady chord that seemed to hum inside their chests. The cub sat back, its silver eyes calm. The voice spoke again. You are not lost, but you are meant to remember. The grove grew brighter, the light spilling between the branches, and for a moment, the bears felt like they were seeing something they had forgotten long ago, something safe, something warm. When they pulled their paws away, the sound faded back to the gentle, drifting whistle. The cub turned, heading back toward the archway. Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear followed, but they could feel the music lingering in them, like the last note of a song that never really ends. The pale cub led them back through the archway of trees, and the moment they stepped under it, the meadow returned. The lampost's pale glow was softer now, like the last flicker of a candle. The other pale animals were gone, or maybe they had simply melted into the silver grass. The cub paused at the edge of the meadow. It looked back at them one last time. Its glassy silver eyes seemed to say something without words you'll remember when you need to. Then it turned and walked into the tall grass, vanishing as if it had never been there at all. Grizz let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Panda rubbed his eyes, suddenly feeling very sleepy. Ice Bear held the candle a little closer, its light now steady and warm. The path back to their cave seemed different than the way they had come, shorter, gentler. The trees no longer leaned so close, and the wind had returned, brushing their fur like a soft hand. Every so often, the hollow whistle floated through the night, far away now, like a song they had once known. When they reached the cave, the air inside was still warm from earlier. Their blankets were where they'd left them, pillows soft and waiting. Grizz flopped down first, wrapping himself like a burrito. Panda curled up with his pillow under his chin, letting out a quiet sigh. Ice Bear set the candle on its little dish by the wall. The flame danced gently, painting soft gold on the stone. For a while, none of them spoke. The only sounds were their slow breaths and the faintest echo of a whistle, so distant it could have been part of the wind. Grizz murmured, half asleep, "Do you think we'll see that cub again?" Panda's reply was muffled by his pillow. Maybe, in a dream. Ice Bear simply closed his eyes. Dreams remember. Outside, the moon drifted behind another cloud. The forest settled into silence, except for one last soft hoo, hoo. It faded into the night like the end of a lullaby. And in the warm cave, the three brothers slept, safe together, and cradled by the gentle memory of the hollow whistle. It had been a long day in the forest. Grizz carried the basket full of berries they'd picked. Panda balanced the little box of honeycomb, and Ice Bear was carrying both of them when they got too tired to walk. The sun had already dipped low, painting the sky with long streaks of orange and pink. By the time they reached the narrow path that led to their cave, the first stars were starting to peek out. Panda yawned so wide, he nearly dropped his honeycomb. "We should have gone home earlier." Grizz grinned. "We're fine. We walked this path 100 times. Ice Bear said nothing, but his ears twitched. That's when Panda saw it. Just off the path, between two tall pines, a faint light was glowing. It was warm and golden, like the flame of a candle trapped in a glass jar. Only it wasn't flickering like a normal flame. It swayed, slowly, like it was moving. Guys?" Panda pointed. Grizz squinted. "Looks like someone left a lantern out there." Ice Bear stared for a long moment. "Lanterns. Don't move." The light swayed again, slipping deeper between the trees as if inviting them to follow. Panda shook his head. "Nope, no way. We're not going off the path at night." But Grizz was already stepping toward it. What if someone dropped it? Could be lost. The air grew cooler as they left the path. The lantern glowed brighter now, hanging just ahead, but it wasn't tied to a branch. It wasn't resting on the ground. It hovered, like it was hanging from nothing at all. When they stopped, the lantern stopped. When they took a step, it drifted forward just enough to stay ahead of them. Panda whispered, "It's following us?" Ice Bear's voice was calm. "Or leading." They reached a small clearing where the grass was pale in the starlight. The lantern floated to the center, glowing like a golden moon. Grizz stepped closer, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw something behind the glass. Not a candle, not a light bulb, something moving. Before he could look closer, the lantern turned. Not swung, not blown by wind turned, like it was looking at them. Then, without a sound, it began to drift back toward the path home. Panda clutched his honeycomb tightly. "I don't like this." Grizz smiled nervously. "It's probably friendly." Ice Bear followed, candle-bright eyes fixed on the golden glow. The lantern floated ahead of them all the way to the mouth of the cave. There it stopped, swaying gently in the night air. Then it drifted inside. The brothers stood at the entrance, staring at the glow inside their own cave. It painted the stone walls in soft gold, as if the sun had somehow slipped in after dark. Grizz whispered, "I think it's waiting for us." Panda frowned. "Lanterns don't wait. Lanterns just sit there." Ice Bear stepped forward without another word. Inside, the lantern floated above their low wooden table, the one where they usually played cards or shared late-night snacks. It didn't spin or bob. It just hovered, perfectly still. The golden light pooled across their blankets, their mugs, even the old rug in the corner, making everything look warmer and softer than usual. Grizz took a slow step closer. The glass sides were clear, but instead of a wick or a candle, there was something like a tiny, swirling flame. It wasn't fire exactly, more like liquid light, curling and shifting as if it were alive. Panda stayed near the entrance. "This is how scary movies start." Ice Bear circled the table slowly, eyes locked on the lantern. Not scary, curious. For a moment, the brothers just watched it. Then the lantern did something none of them expected. It tilted ever so slightly toward a shelf on the wall. On that shelf sat a small, dusty tin box they'd found in the woods months ago. Grizz tilted his head. Huh. Does it want us to open that? Panda's eyes went wide. What if it's cursed? But the lantern tilted again, almost insistently. Ice Bear stepped over, lifted the tin box, and placed it on the table. The lantern's glow brightened. Grizz slowly lifted the lid. Inside was nothing. Nothing but a faint smell like pine needles after rain. The lantern's light pulsed once, twice, then steadied. And it floated backward toward the far corner of the cave as if satisfied. Panda hugged his pillow now. It's not leaving, is it? Grizz shrugged. Maybe it likes us. Ice Bear stared at the glow in the corner. Lanterns don't like. Lanterns remember. Outside, the forest whispered in the wind. Inside, the lantern swayed gently, as though breathing with them. The brothers settled into their blankets, the golden glow washing over the cave walls like a soft tide. But just before drifting off, Panda's eyes flickered open. The lantern had moved again just a little closer to the sleeping spot, and it was still watching. The next night, the forest was silver under the moon. The air felt still, the kind of stillness that made every little sound seem louder. The brothers were finishing their berry tea when they noticed it. The lantern had drifted out of its corner. It hovered near the entrance of the cave, swaying slowly, almost impatiently. Grizz put down his mug. It wants us to follow again. Panda frowned into his blanket. Can't it want us to stay here instead? Ice Bear stood, tying his scarf. Some things don't wait. Outside, the lantern floated just ahead of them, its golden glow spilling over the path. When they slowed, it slowed. When they stopped, it stopped. They passed the familiar stump where mushrooms grew in the damp. They passed the bend in the trail where the wind always whispered through the branches. But tonight, the lantern didn't stop at any of those places. It led them deeper, past the spots they knew into the part of the forest where the trees grew closer together and the air felt thicker. Panda hugged his pillow tighter. I don't remember this path. Grizz glanced around. That's because we've never been this far. The lantern's glow didn't dim, even as the moonlight faded under the thick branches. It painted the tree trunks in gold and sent long shadows stretching behind them. After what felt like an hour, they stepped into a small, round clearing. In the center stood a shallow stone basin, filled with still water. The lantern floated above it, light shimmering across the surface like melted honey. The brothers stepped closer. The water was perfectly smooth, reflecting the lantern's glow, but when Grizz looked down, he didn't see his own reflection. He saw the cave. Their cave, warm and lit, with 3 blankets folded neatly on the floor. Panda leaned over the basin. That's, us. Right now. Ice Bear's voice was quiet. Not now. Not yet. The lantern dipped lower until it was almost touching the water. Then the image shifted. Instead of the cave, they saw a dark stretch of woods, and in the center of that darkness, a tiny golden light moving through the trees. Grizz shivered. That's it. That's his lantern. The lantern pulsed once, the light inside swirling faster for a moment. Then it lifted away from the basin and began to drift toward the far side of the clearing. Grizz looked at Panda and Ice Bear. We're going after it, right? Panda groaned. I knew you were going to say that. But he followed anyway, pillow in arms. The lantern's glow slipped between two narrow tree trunks, and for just a moment, it looked like the forest beyond them was different. The air shimmered, and the shadows leaned toward the light, as if they too wanted to follow. The two tree trunks stood so close together, the brothers had to squeeze sideways to get through. As soon as they stepped past them, the air changed. It was warmer here, yet heavy, like they were walking inside a held breath. The forest beyond didn't look like the one they knew. The trees were taller, their bark a deep, silvery black. Leaves shimmered faintly as though lit from within. And though there was no wind, the branches swayed slow like they were listening. The lantern floated ahead, moving deeper along a path of pale moss. Its golden light spilled over the trunks, and wherever it touched, tiny flecks of gold shimmered on the bark, fading when the glow moved away. Panda whispered, "This doesn't feel real." Grizz whispered back, "Feels like a story." Ice Bear said nothing, but his eyes were following the way the shadows bent toward the lantern. As they walked, the forest made soft sounds, not creaks or snaps, but something like low voices. They couldn't make out words, only the gentle rise and fall of tones. It was almost like the trees were speaking to one another. The lantern slowed near a tree much wider than the others. Its roots curled up out of the ground like giant claws, but instead of being sharp, they were smooth, polished by time. Nestled between them was another stone basin, just like the one in the clearing before, but this one was filled not with water, but with dry leaves. The leaves shifted slightly as if stirred by something unseen. The lantern lowered itself over the basin. A soft pulse of golden light spread out, touching the leaves, and one by one they began to curl inward, folding themselves into tiny shapes. First a bird, then a small fox, then a bear cub. The folded leaf animals hopped down from the basin and padded into the mossy path, their edges glowing faintly. They didn't make a sound, but they all moved in the same direction, deeper into the forest. Grizz's eyes widened. "Is it showing us the way?" Panda hugged his pillow tighter. "Or leading us somewhere we don't want to go?" Ice Bear watched the lantern. "Lantern knows where." The golden light lifted again, floating just above the leaf animals as they all began to move. The brothers followed, their paws sinking into the soft moss, the strange low voices of the forest brushing past their ears like whispers they almost understood. Ahead, through the trees, a new light began to appear. Not gold this time, silver. It glowed steady, like the moon had fallen to the forest floor. The lantern slowed, waiting for them to catch up. And for the first time, Grizz thought he saw something move inside the glass, not just the swirling flame, but the shadow of a face. The silver glow was so bright now it painted the moss under their paws in pale light. The leaf animals trotted ahead without hesitation, their folded edges catching both the lantern's gold and the silver light ahead. The brothers pushed through a final curtain of hanging vines and stopped. They were standing at the edge of a wide, still pond. In the center, on a small island of dark stone, was something they'd never seen before. It looked like a mirror, but instead of standing upright, it lay flat, like a pool within the rock. The silver light came from its surface, and it didn't reflect the forest around it. Instead, it showed a vast night sky, thick with stars and a single, enormous moon, bright enough to hurt their eyes. Panda blinked. "That's not our sky." Grizz squinted. "Then whose is it?" Ice Bear whispered. "Moon's." calling. The lantern floated forward over the pond, its gold spilling across the water. When the two lights met gold and silver, the air around them rippled like heat waves. The low forest voices grew louder now, but their tone was gentle, almost like a lullaby. The leaf animals reached the pond's edge and began folding themselves smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the moss. The lantern dipped lower, touching its glass to the mirror's surface. The silver light flared, and for a moment, the brothers saw shapes moving within it. Tall figures draped in what looked like flowing leaves, their faces hidden. Each held a lantern of their own, glowing in different colors, blue, green, amber. One of the figures turned toward the brothers. It raised its lantern, and the gold in the floating flame before them pulsed in response like it was answering. Panda's voice was barely a whisper. "It's talking to them." Grizz felt his fur prickle. "It belongs here." Ice Bear nodded. "Lanterns, home." The golden flame flickered faster, and for the first time, the brothers understood it had been trying to return to this place ever since it followed them. The forest, the leaf animals, the whispering trees, they'd all been guiding it back. But then, the silver light dimmed just slightly. The tall figures began to fade, and the gold flame wavered, almost as if it were struggling. Panda clutched his pillow. "Wait, is it trapped?" The lantern's glow flared again, stronger this time, but now the low voices of the forest sounded urgent, rushing like wind through leaves. And then a faint, echoing whistle drifted across the pond. Not like the hollow one they'd heard before. This was softer, warmer, but it pulled at them all the same. The lantern slowly turned in the air, facing the brothers. Its flame dipped once, like a bow. The golden flame hovered before them, bowing ever so slightly as though it were saying thank you. The soft whistle echoed again across the pond, not frightening now, but gentle, like a voice calling a friend home. Grizz stepped closer to the water's edge. You have to go, don't you?" Panda's eyes shone. "But what if we never see you again?" Ice Bear reached out a paw. "Friends, always meet again." The lantern floated lower until it was almost touching their paws. For a heartbeat, the brothers felt warmth spread from their toes to their ears, the kind of comfort you get when you're wrapped in a thick blanket on a cold night. Then it slowly drifted backward over the still pond toward the dark stone island and its silver mirror sky. As the lantern's gold light touched the silver surface, the pond's reflection shimmered. The tall, leaf-draped figures reappeared, their lanterns glowing in welcome. The gold flame pulsed brightly once, twice, and then, in a blink, it was gone. The silver light faded back into the still water. The forest grew quiet again, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. For a moment, the brothers just stood there, paws on the cool moss. Panda sniffled. I'm going to miss it." Grizz smiled gently. "Yeah, but I think it's where it's supposed to be." Ice Bear nodded. "Home is everything." They turned to leave, the leaf animals nowhere in sight now. The path back seemed shorter, the trees leaning gently overhead like sleepy guardians. By the time they reached the cave, the moon had shifted low in the sky, washing the forest floor in pale silver. Inside, their beds were waiting, pillows fluffed, blankets warm. Panda curled up first, clutching his plush toy. Grizz stretched out, letting out a long sigh. Ice Bear was last, pulling the covers snug over them all. Just as their eyes began to close, a faint, golden flicker danced across the cave wall like a tiny flame waving goodnight. The brothers smiled, and sleep carried them off in quiet, steady waves. Outside, the forest whispered, not in warning now, but in a lullaby. And far away, beyond the pond and its mirror sky, the lantern's light glowed warmly among others, safe at last. Good night. The morning started the way it always did in the bear's cave, slow, warm, and filled with the smell of something sweet. Grizz was the first to stir, his fur still ruffled from sleep. He stretched with a loud yawn, blinking at the faint golden light seeping in from the mouth of the cave. Panda lay cocooned in his blanket burrito, mumbling something about 5 more minutes. Ice Bear was already awake, he always was, quietly tidying the table. Today was Pancake Day. Grizz had been talking about it all week, and even Panda had gone to bed early the night before just so breakfast would come faster. The stack was already forming on the griddle, soft and golden, filling the cave with the kind of scent that makes you want to stay in your pajamas forever. Panda finally emerged from his blanket with sleepy eyes. Smells like happiness. Ice Bear slid another pancake onto the growing pile. Grizz set the table, humming an old tune he couldn't quite remember the words to. But when Grizz went to put down the plates, he noticed something odd. There were 4 settings: fork, knife, plate, napkin, all perfectly arranged, and none of them had been put there by him. Ice Bear? Grizz whispered. Ice Bear didn't look up from flipping the next pancake. Didn't set that. Panda tilted his head, still half asleep. Maybe you just forgot you did it. But Grizz shook his head. Nope. 3 of us, 3 chairs. But now, he turned toward the table. 4 chairs. The extra ones had slightly pulled out as though someone had just been sitting there. And on the plate, a small, pale handprint glistened in the morning light like frost, even though the air in the cave was warm. The smell of pancakes hung thick and sweet. But now, beneath it, the faintest whiff of something else drifted through the room. Something like cold air from an open door. Ice Bear quietly placed the next pancake onto the empty plate. No one told him to. It just felt right. The 3 bears glanced at each other, then back at the chair. They didn't speak, but they all thought the same thing. Breakfast was about to be, different. The steam from the pancake stack curled upward like tiny ghosts, soft and harmless. Grizz sat down, trying to act like nothing was weird, but his eyes kept drifting to that 4th chair. It wasn't empty anymore. Not exactly. There wasn't anyone visible sitting there, but the air shimmered faintly above the seat, like heat rising off pavement. Except this shimmer felt cold, and when Grizz looked directly at it, it almost seemed to take shape. Not enough to see a face, but enough to know something was there. Panda's paws tightened around his mug of hot cocoa. You guys? He whispered. Ice Bear calmly poured syrup onto the empty plate. The amber liquid slid over the stack and stopped. Not like syrup should. It halted mid-drip as though an invisible fork had caught it. A soft scrape echoed the sound of a knife on a plate. But none of them were moving. Grizz forced a laugh. Okay, so, mystery guest, welcome to Pancake Day. No answer. Just a faint, frosty breath drifting across the table toward him. It made the fur on his arms lift, but not from fear. The breath smelled faintly of vanilla. Panda leaned forward slowly. Do you live here? The fork on the empty plate tapped twice. Grizz blinked. 2 taps. That's like a yes, right? The fork tapped twice again. Ice Bear nodded. Yes. They exchanged glances. It wasn't dangerous, not yet. But it was strange enough to make their morning feel slower, heavier, like the air was thinking about something before it moved. Somewhere in the distance, deep inside the woods, a faint humming started. Low, steady, like someone humming a song through the closed lips. It wasn't coming from outside the cave entrance. It was coming from the back wall. The wall where the old pantry door stood shut. The humming was soft at first. So soft, Panda thought it might be in his head. But when he held his breath, he heard it clearer. Slow, almost like a lullaby. The fourth chair scraped back just a little, though no one had touched it. A faint chill slid across the floor toward the pantry door. Grizz stood up slowly. Okay, so our guest wants us to, go in there? Ice Bear, already holding a flashlight, simply said, yes. Panda frowned. Since when do we even have a pantry door back there? That's just the rock wall. Grizz glanced over his shoulder. Sure enough, yesterday, there had been nothing but smooth stone. Now, wedged between their bookshelf and the old coat rack, was a tall wooden door, dark and slightly warped, with a round brass knob that looked too cold to touch. They approached together. The humming stopped. Silence filled the cave, but it wasn't an empty silence. It felt like someone was holding their breath along with them. Grizz reached for the knob. A pulse of cold air seeped out before he even turned it. The pancakes on the table cooled instantly, steam vanishing. Panda shivered, pulling his blanket tighter. The door opened with a groan, revealing a narrow hallway that shouldn't have fit inside their cave. It stretched farther than their flashlight beam could reach, lined with shelves stacked high with jars. Each jar held something pale and soft, like folded fabric. But as Ice Bear stepped closer, they saw it wasn't fabric at all. They were aprons, tiny child-sized aprons, each one neatly tied and pressed except for the faint stains like syrup or something darker. Grizz's voice wavered. So, our guest likes to cook? From behind them, the empty fork tapped the table once. Just once. The sound was sharp, almost like a warning. Panda turned toward the table. The fourth chair was now pushed in, and the plate was empty. Somewhere deep in the hallway, the humming started again. Slower this time, and it was getting closer. The humming moved like shadow, not rushing. Not creeping, but steady. Every note felt heavier than the last, like each hum was pulling the hallway closer to them. The bears stood in the doorway. The air in the cave had cooled enough for their breath to drift like soft clouds. Ice Bear held the flashlight higher. Something shifted in the darkness. Not a shape, not yet, just the faintest shimmer, like moonlight bending around an outline that wasn't fully there. And then, the smell, warm bread, maple syrup, and something faintly metallic like old pans left too long in the sink. Panda whispered, "It smells like breakfast." Grizz swallowed. "Yeah, but like someone else's breakfast." The humming paused. A small clink echoed the sound of porcelain touching wood. When the light swept past the shelves, they saw one jar was missing. A child-sized apron now floated gently in the hallway, swaying as though an invisible person held it up to check the size. Ice Bear's voice was calm, but quieter than usual. "Too small for us?" The apron drifted toward them. Grizz took a half-step back. Panda held onto his brother's arm, whispering, "What's it doing?" The apron folded itself slowly and laid on the nearest shelf. Then, two pale hands appeared in the beam of the flashlight. They were thin, almost see-through and dusted lightly with flour that never fell. The rest of her stepped into view. She was wearing an apron tied neatly at the back. Her hair was a faded, floating halo, and her eyes weren't quite eyes at all. More like deep silver pools reflecting light that wasn't there. When she spoke, her voice was soft and warm, like someone trying to wake you gently. "I've been waiting for someone to share breakfast with." She glanced past them to the table, where the pancakes sat untouched, except the top one was gone. "I hope you don't mind," she said, folding her hands. "I haven't had company in a very long time." Her smile was kind, but her shadow stretched across the floor toward their feet, longer than it should be, and it moved just slightly after she stopped. From somewhere behind her, deeper in the hallway, another voice began to hum. Lower, slower, like it was answering her. The lower humming rolled out of the hallway like a slow fog. It was heavier than the first voice, each note rattling the shelves just enough to make the jars tremble. The ghostly cook's eyes softened. "He's awake," she whispered. Her hand, still dusted with flour, gripped the edges of her apron. "You'll have to meet him. He, doesn't like to be left alone during meals." Grizz tried to sound casual. Is he like your friend?" Her silver gaze flickered. "Husband, once." Without waiting for their reply, she turned and floated deeper into the pantry hall. The bears exchanged a glance. Ice Bear clicked the flashlight to its brightest beam, though the light felt dimmer here, swallowed by the air. The further they walked, the narrower the hallway felt. The shelves began to change instead of aprons. Jars now held silverware. Forks, knives, and spoons, all mismatched, all faintly tarnished. Some still had bits of something clinging to them, though none of it looked fresh. Panda whispered, "Do you hear that?" Because beneath the humming was another sound, a faint wet tapping, like someone stirring batter, slowly. They reached a turn in the hallway. The ghost cook hovered just ahead, her hands clasped politely in front of her. "This way," she said. Her voice trembled for the first time. They followed and stepped into a small, dimly lit kitchen that could not possibly fit inside their cave. The walls leaned inward as if the room were holding its breath. In the center sat a wooden table, far older than anything the bears owned. 2 chairs stood side by side. One chair was empty. The other was not. The figure in it was broad-shouldered, his outline blurred as though steam kept rising from his form. His head was bowed over a plate where pancakes too dark, almost blackened, were stacked high. A metal fork scraped the plate once, twice. Then he lifted his head. His eyes were dark, but they caught the light in thin silver slivers. He smiled without showing teeth. And when he spoke, his voice was deep enough that they felt it in their ribs. "You brought guests." The cook's hands tightened on her apron. "Yes, dear. They came for breakfast." The fork in his hand stilled. Slowly he turned toward them. Then he said, "They should sit." Behind them, the pantry door, the one leading back to their cave, swung shut without a soul. The 3 bears froze, paused halfway to waving politely. The man's silver-slit eyes stayed on them, steady, unblinking. The pancakes on his plate steamed faintly, but the scent wasn't like Grizz's fluffy sweet ones. The smell was darker, like burnt sugar and damp wood. The ghostly cook placed 3 more plates on the table. Each one had a single pancake, thin and pale, with the faint shimmer of frost across its surface. "Go on," the man said, his voice low, the fork tapping twice against his plate. "Eat before it gets cold." Panda swallowed hard. It's already cold. The man's smile widened. That's the rule. Ice Bear picked up his fork slowly. Rule? The cook's voice softened, almost tender. Once you share a meal here, you must finish it. All of it. Or, her eyes flickered toward the hallway behind them. The kitchen keeps you. A faint shiver rippled through the walls. Cupboard doors clicked open and shut by themselves, the silverware in the jars clinking in unison. The humming started again, deeper this time, like the kitchen itself was joining in. Grizz forced a laugh. Hey, we're more waffle guys, actually. The man's fork scraped his plate. The light dimmed. You'll eat, he said gently, and then you'll leave. His eyes drifted to the pantry door, the one that had shut behind them. But if you leave anything behind, you'll stay. The cook stood by their side, her flour-dusted hands resting lightly on the table. Eat quickly, she murmured, and don't speak while you do. The bears exchanged a look, and without another word, each took a bite. The pancake was cold, soft, and strangely heavy, like it was made from snow. It melted in their mouths, leaving a faint sweetness and the taste of something old. They chewed in silence. The man's humming slowed. The walls stopped trembling. When the last bite was gone, the cook quietly took their plates and set them into a sink that hadn't been there before. The pantry door creaked open. Go, she whispered, before he changes his mind. The bears slipped through, finding themselves back in their warm, familiar cave. The sunlight through the window felt brighter than it should. Grizz turned back just in time to see the pantry door swing shut. From the other side, faintly, came the sound of a fork scraping a plate. Once, twice, and then silence. The moonlight spilled across the bear's cave, turning the blanket pile into a silver mountain. Grizz lay sprawled on his back, snoring softly with one paw dangling over the edge. Panda was curled up with his phone resting on his chest, the screen dimmed but still glowing faintly. Ice Bear slept the deepest, his steady breathing a slow, peaceful rhythm in the quiet night. Outside, the forest whispered, leaves shifting like they were telling secrets only the wind could understand. Somewhere far away, a branch snapped. The sound was small, but it made Panda's ear twitch. He blinked awake, rubbing his eyes. The clock on the wall glowed 11:58 p.m. in soft red numbers. He yawned, rolled over, and then froze. Across the cave, in the farthest corner, a place they usually kept stacked with boxes, was something new. A tall, narrow door. It was made of dark wood with an old brass handle that gleamed faintly in the moonlight. And yet, it hadn't been there when they went to bed. Panda sat up slowly. Guys? Grizz groaned. 5 more minutes. Ice Bear stirred, his eyes opening just enough to glance toward where Panda was pointing. He sat up without a word. The three of them stared at the door in silence. The clock ticked. 11:59. Panda's voice was a whisper now. We never had a door there, right? Grizz rubbed his eyes. Nope, definitely not. He tilted his head. Kind of makes you want to see what's inside, though. The brass handle trembled just slightly, like someone on the other side was waiting. The bears didn't move. The clock changed. 12 a.m. The handle turned. The door swung open with a slow, drawn-out creak. Beyond it was not the rest of their cave. It was a hallway, long, narrow, and filled with a pale bluish fog. At the far end, faint light flickered, like a candle swaying in a breeze. And then they heard it. A sound like footsteps, far away but getting closer. Slow, steady, one after the other. Grizz swallowed. Okay. Maybe we don't open strange doors at midnight, but the door was already open. The fog curled into the cave like it had been waiting for permission to enter. It slithered low along the ground, wrapping itself around the bear's paws before they could even back away. It wasn't cold, but it made their fur prickle all the same. Panda clutched his blanket tighter. We should close it. He reached for the door handle, but his paw stopped halfway. The brass was warm. Too warm. Like someone had been holding it from the other side just seconds ago. Grizz leaned forward a little, eyes narrowed at the hallway. It stretched much farther than seemed possible inside their cave, fading into that hazy blue glow. The footsteps had stopped. Now, there was only silence. Ice Bear stepped forward. His pads made no sound against the stone floor. He peered into the fog, his reflection barely visible, in the brass trim along the doorframe. Except the reflection wasn't matching him. In the brass, his reflected paw lifted, but Ice Bear's real paw stayed still. It was subtle, almost easy to miss. Grizz noticed. Ice Bear? That's creepy. The hallway seemed to breathe. A soft gust drifted out, carrying the faintest scent of pine needles and something older like books that hadn't been touched in decades. Panda's voice trembled. Why does it smell like my grandma's attic? A flicker of movement caught their eyes. Far down the hallway, past the swaying candlelight, a shadow leaned out from behind the wall. Too tall to be a person. Too still to be alive. It didn't step forward. It didn't retreat. It just watched. The bears stood frozen, hearts thudding loud enough to hear in their own ears. Then softly, so softly, they almost missed it. The shadow whispered, "Come in." The door shivered in its frame. The hallway light blinked once, then steadied, and the shadow was gone. Grizz took a step back. Nope, big nope. But the fog was thicker now, curling around their ankles, like it was gently tugging them toward the doorway. The fog swirled, slow but certain, as if it had all night to convince them. Panda pressed back against the couch cushion, shaking his head. Nope, not going. Not even for snacks. Grizz glanced at Ice Bear. Ice Bear didn't blink. He was still staring into the hallway, his paws loose at his sides, like he was listening for something only he could hear. Then the hallway exhaled. It was the only way to describe it, a soft rush of air that made the candles along the walls sway, and the shadows stretched like claws across the floor. And then the door began to close. Not fast, not slamming, just slow, deliberate, like it was waiting to see if anyone would stop it. Grizz's instincts kicked in. Wait! If it closes... Ice Bear moved first, slipping his paw onto the door before it could shut. The second his pads touched the wood, the warm brass handle snapped cold. His breath came out in a cloud. From deep in the hallway, a faint creak echoed like floorboard bending under weight. The sound was coming closer. Panda crept forward reluctantly. What if it's just like a friendly midnight tour? You know, like those haunted house rides at theme parks? Grizz raised a brow. Since when do theme parks breathe fog into your living room? Ice Bear's eyes never left the darkness ahead. Something's coming. And then they saw it. Far down the hall, past the last flickering candle, something round and pale rolled slowly into the light. It wasn't a ball. It was a clock face, no frame, no hands, just a floating, glowing circle, ticking without sound. The hallway whispered again, but the voice was sharper now. Hurry. The door started to swing inward, as though something on the other side had grabbed it from within. Grizz, against every good instinct, grabbed Panda's paw. 3 steps in, look around, and we're out. Deal? Panda groaned. This is how people disappear in scary movies, you know? Still, the 3 of them crossed the threshold. And the second all their paws touched the hallway floor, the door slammed shut behind them. The candles went out. The ticking stopped. And in the dark, something else began to count. 1. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't even exactly spoken. It was more like the number just appeared inside their heads heavy, echoing, like a drop of water falling in a deep well. 2. Grizz reached out in the darkness, finding Panda's paw again. It was trembling. Not from fear alone, the air had turned colder still, like someone had opened a freezer around them. 3. Ice Bear's voice came low and even. Something's pacing. And it was. A soft scrape, then another, circling them. Every time it moved, the cold followed. 4. Somewhere ahead, the pale clock face appeared again, glowing faintly, floating in the dark. But now thin cracks ran through it, spiderwebbing out from the center like frozen lightning. 5. Panda swallowed. What happens when it gets to 12? Grizz shook his head, even though no one could see it. Not gonna find out. 6. Ice Bear stepped forward toward the clock. The pacing stopped. The air held its breath. 7. A faint shimmer appeared around the cracks in the clock, like the glow from moonlight on snow. Ice Bear reached for it. And the moment his paw came close, a single word hissed in all their ears. Stay. 8. The ground under their paws shifted. The smooth wooden hallway floor now felt uneven. Pebbles, dirt, leaves. 9. Grizz's fur bristled. We're not inside anymore. Somewhere far above, an owl hooted, soft, slow, watching. 10. The pale clock tilted slightly in the air, and the cracks in its face widened. From deep inside it, something began to move. 11. The sound sank into their bones. The floating clock now glowed so brightly, it cast their shadows across the ground, long, stretched, and bending at strange angles. The cracks in its face pulsed with faint, silvery light. Grizz squinted. That's not just light. Inside the cracks, it almost looked like tiny scenes were moving, dark trees, shifting fog, and something gliding between them. Panda clung tighter to Grizz's arm. We should not be looking in there. 12. The final count didn't echo. It rang. A sound like a bell underwater, deep and slow, rolled through the air. The clock's center split apart soundlessly, peeling away like petals on a flower. And beyond it was not the hallway. It was a clearing under a sky with no stars. The trees around it leaned inward, their bare branches twitching ever so slightly as if trying to reach whatever stood in the center. And in the center was another door. It was tall, black as soot, with no handle. Its frame was carved with looping symbols that seemed to shift if you looked too long. The clock drifted closer, the light from its cracks spilling into the clearing. Ice Bear's voice was steady but quieter than before. Door doesn't belong here. Grizz frowned. Neither do we. He took a step back and felt dirt crumble under his paw. The ground was slowly sliding toward the clearing. Not them walking, but the whole patch of earth they stood on being drawn in. Panda's eyes widened. It's pulling us in. We're not walking, right? Grizz shook his head, grabbing him tight. Nope. Not walking. Definitely not walking. The black door ahead let out a low groan, as though it had been listening the entire time. And now it wanted to answer. A single thin line appeared down its middle, a crack, and from within, a warm golden light spilled out, and the faint smell of pancakes. The smell grew stronger, butter, syrup, and something faintly smoky like a campfire far away. Grizz's ears twitched. Either I'm losing my mind, or that's breakfast. The golden light spilled wider as the crack in the black door opened. No hinges creaked. It just, parted, like two shadows sliding away from each other. Beyond was a kitchen. Not their kitchen. It looked old shelves lined with chipped mugs, a crooked window looking out at more darkness, and a big cast-iron stove in the corner. On the stove, a stack of pancakes steamed gently. Ice Bear stepped through first. The moment his paw crossed the threshold, the clock behind them vanished, along with the clearing. Grizz and Panda scrambled in after him, just before the black door sealed shut. The warmth inside was a shock after the cold air outside. Somewhere, a kettle whistled softly. Then, from the far side of the room, someone stepped into view. It wasn't a someone exactly. It was shaped like a bear, but taller, its fur pale gray and dusted with flour. Its eyes were gentle, but didn't seem to blink. In its paws was a wooden plate with more pancakes. It set the plate on the table, gesturing for them to sit. Grizz hesitated. Thanks? The pale bear's mouth curved into the smallest smile. Then it picked up a fork and began to count. Softly. 1, 2, Panda froze mid-bite. Grizz looked at Ice Bear. Ice Bear's voice was low. Same count as the clock. The pale bear stopped at 12. And at that moment, the warmth in the room shifted, like the sun had dipped behind clouds. The pancakes still smelled sweet. The table was still set for 4. But somewhere, deep in the walls, the sound of a midnight door began to open again. The bears were sprawled out in the sun, the kind of summer afternoon where the air feels thick and lazy. Grizz had a lemonade in one paw, Panda was flipping through a comic, and Ice Bear was slowly turning a popsicle in his paw, letting it melt just enough before each bite. Not a single cloud in the sky. Cicadas hummed. The world smelled like grass and warm pavement. Then a tiny white speck floated down between them. Grizz blinked. Is that... Another white speck followed. Then another. Panda sat up, squinting. No way. No way. It's the middle of July. Ice Bear caught one on his paw. It didn't melt. It stayed perfectly shaped. Tiny crystals glittering like glass. He held it closer. Not normal snow. Before they could react, the air around them turned cool. The cicadas went silent. A breeze that smelled faintly of pine swept through the yard, but when they looked toward the trees, the leaves weren't moving. More flakes began drifting down, slow and steady. They didn't land on the grass. They hovered just a few inches above it, as if the ground refused to take them. Panda whispered, Is it snowing? Only here? Grizz stood, turning in a slow circle. Beyond their yard, the street was still in full, summer kids riding bikes, heat waves rising from the road. But the bear's space had become a quiet winter bubble. From somewhere in the stillness, a sound began. Soft, far off like bells being rung in a cavern. It was hard to tell if it was music or a warning. The bells rang again, closer now. 3 slow chimes. Then silence. The snowflakes seemed to pause in the air as if listening too. Ice Bear stepped toward the street. The moment his paw crossed the invisible line where the summer heat began, the flakes in front of him scattered away as though an unseen breeze pushed them back into the cold. Grizz frowned. So, we can't just leave? Panda looked around. Maybe we're not supposed to leave. The snow swirled then, not falling at random anymore. It began drifting in a steady trail toward the woods. A path. The bears exchanged a look. They'd learned long ago that weird usually meant adventure or trouble. Either way, they couldn't ignore it. The air grew quieter with each step into the trees. Even the crunch of their paws on the ground sounded soft, as though the snow absorbed the noise. And yet, the flakes still hovered above the earth, never touching it. Halfway down the path, Panda reached out to touch a low-hanging branch. It was warm like summer, but the snow floating around it was icy cold. Grizz rubbed his arms. Okay, this is officially the weirdest weather ever. Then, from ahead, a light flickered between the trees, pale blue, moving like it was breathing. The bells chimed again this time, right beside them. No one was holding any bells. No one was there at all. Ice Bear's voice was calm but firm. Something wants us to follow. The path narrowed. The trees leaned closer. And in the distance, the pale blue light began to drift away, deeper into the forest, and the snow following it like moths to a lantern. The deeper they went, the more the summer air faded. Their breaths came out in faint puffs now, curling into the pale light ahead. The snow path ended in a small clearing. At the center hung a lantern. It wasn't on a hook or branch. It floated in midair, rocking gently as if an unseen hand had just set it down. Its glass glowed with that same pale blue shimmer they'd seen through the trees. Grizz stepped forward. Hello? Anyone here? The lantern swayed harder. Snowflakes began circling them now, a slow spiral that made the air feel thick and strange. Panda tugged Grizz's arm. Why does it look like it's, breathing? They stared. The glow inside the lantern pulsed dim, bright, dim again. With every bright pulse, more snow appeared from nowhere, sparkling as it hovered. Ice Bear walked to the edge of the clearing and knelt. The ground beneath the snow was bone dry, no frost, no water, just summer soil. He stood. Snow is not from sky. Snow is from lantern. Grizz grinned nervously. Cool trick. Maybe we take it home? Before anyone could move, the bells chimed again. But this time, the sound came from inside the lantern. The pulsing quickened. The snow around them lifted higher into the air, swirling faster, like they were standing in the middle of a tiny blizzard. Then a voice. Soft, layered, and echoing from nowhere. You found me. Now take me where I belong. The lantern's glow flared and the forest vanished. When the light faded, the bears were no longer in the forest. They stood on a narrow wooden bridge that stretched into endless mist. Below, not water, but shifting colors. Green meadows, frozen lakes, autumn leaves, all swirling together like a painted river. The lantern hovered just ahead and drifting forward as if impatient. Its glow no longer blue, but a pale golden hue, warmer, yet still strange. Panda hugged himself. Where are we? Grizz peered into the mist. A vacation? Time travel, both? Ice Bear said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the swirling seasons below. The air was neither hot nor cold. It changed. One breath smelled of fresh rain, the next of wood smoke, the next of blooming flowers. The bells chimed again, and the lantern's voice returned. The path is closing. Walk with care. They followed, paws echoing on the creaky planks. The mist around them shifted, revealing glimpses of strange lands, a snowy mountain peak in summer sunlight, A beach where leaves blew across the sand, a city street under a thunderstorm of petals. Panda's eyes widened. It's like every season is happening at once. Halfway across the bridge, the boards beneath them shuddered. Something unseen moved below, disturbing the swirl of colors. A shadow, long and slow. The lantern dimmed. Don't look down, it whispered. Grizz, of course, looked down, and immediately wished he hadn't. The shadow shape didn't make sense, like 1,000 branches reaching up at once, twisting toward the bridge. The planks creaked louder. One cracked. The lantern floated faster toward the far end of the bridge. They ran after it, and behind them, the shadow rose. The bears burst off the bridge, paws landing on solid ground just as a splintering crack echoed behind them. When they turned, the bridge was gone, not broken, simply vanished into the mist. Before them lay a wide, open meadow. But this wasn't any meadow they'd seen before. Half of it was lush green, dotted with wildflowers swaying in a warm breeze. The other half was blanketed in fresh snow, each flake falling in slow motion, refusing to melt even where it touched the grass. A perfect, unmoving line split the two halves down the middle. The lantern hovered over that dividing line, its golden glow flickering gently. "Oh, this is where I belong," the voice whispered. "Where warmth and cold meet, and the year breathes." Grizz stepped forward cautiously. "So, you live in half winter, half summer?" Ice Bear tilted his head. "Lantern is balance." The glow deepened, and in the snow half, a figure appeared. At first it looked like mist, but then it took the shape of a tall, hooded being made entirely of drifting snowflakes. On the summer side, another figure formed this one, glowing faintly with the color of autumn leaves, eyes like setting suns. Panda's voice trembled. Friends of yours?" "They are the keepers," the lantern replied. "I was taken from here long ago, and without me the seasons began to slip." The two figures stepped forward in unison, reaching toward the lantern. But before they could touch it, a sudden wind tore across the meadow. The line between summer and snow began to bend, the balance shifting. The lantern's glow wavered. "They found us," the lantern whispered. "We must hurry." From somewhere deep in the swirling sky above, a low, endless growl began to rumble. The growl deepened, rattling the air like distant thunder. Above the meadow, the clouds swirled, pulling summer heat and winter frost into a single, spiraling storm. The lantern's light shook. "It is the devourer of seasons. It comes to take them all." From the spiral, a vast shape emerged. Not quite animal, not quite storm. It had no face, only a shifting mask of snow, rain, blossoms, and falling leaves. Its body twisted like a tornado, but within it were fragments of places, mountains, oceans, and cities, as if it carried stolen time in its core. Panda backed away. "Nope, nope, too big, way too big." The two keepers, one of snow and one of summer light, stood their ground. They turned to the bears. "You brought the lantern home," the snow figure said. "But now you must choose," said the summer one. "The lantern's light can seal the devourer away, but it will take the strength of the one who carries it." Grizz swallowed. "Strength? Like gym strength or life strength?" Neither keeper answered. The storm beast roared, and the meadow's dividing line began to break, summer frostbitten and winter wilting. The lantern floated to the bears. Its glow warmed their fur. "I cannot choose for you." Panda looked at Grizz. Grizz looked at Ice Bear. Ice Bear simply stepped forward. "Ice Bear will hold light." The keepers bowed their heads. The lantern's glow rushed into Ice Bear's paws, filling the air with a sound like thousands of tiny chimes. The devourer lunged, and Ice Bear raised the lantern high. The light exploded, flooding the meadow, the bridge, the mist, and the storm itself. The beast let out one last echoing cry before it shattered into the four seasons, scattering like petals on the wind. When the brightness faded, the meadow was whole again. The keepers were gone. The lantern rested in the snow, dark and quiet. Grizz placed a paw on Ice Bear's shoulder. "You okay, buddy?" Ice Bear nodded. "Season's safe. Time to sleep." They curled together in the strange meadow, where summer's warmth and winter's hush kept them in perfect comfort. Snowflakes and fireflies drifted above them, and somewhere in the distance the bells chimed softly, until everything faded into dream. It was one of those evenings where the air felt extra cozy. Grizz was sprawled on the couch with a blanket over his head like a tent. Panda sat cross-legged with his phone, watching baking videos with the brightness turned low. Ice Bear was quietly stirring hot cocoa in 3 mugs, each topped with little marshmallow bears. Outside, the rain wasn't heavy, just a soft tapping against the windows like fingertips on glass. The cave felt safe and warm, almost too comfortable to move. Grizz yawned so wide it sounded like a sigh. "This is the perfect weather to not do anything." Panda nodded. Not even think about doing anything." Ice Bear set the mugs down on the coffee table. "Cocoa hot. Careful." That's when Panda noticed it leaning against the wall by the bookshelf, wrapped in dusty brown paper and tied with twine. "Hey, what's that?" Panda pointed. Grizz blinked. "That? I found it on the thrift store's free pile earlier. Figured it'd look cool on our wall." He slid off the couch and tugged at the twine. The paper crinkled and fell away to reveal a frame old with chipped gold leaf edges holding a painting of a forest path under moonlight. It was strangely detailed. You could see every leaf, every shadow. The moonlight on the path seemed almost to glow. Panda tilted his head. "Kinda spooky, but nice." Ice Bear sipped cocoa. "Tree's too quiet." They decided to hang it above the fireplace. The room looked different immediately, like the painting was part of the cave's air. Later, as they settled down with their drinks, Grizz noticed something odd. "Hey, was that bench always in the picture?" Panda looked. "What bench?" Grizz frowned. In the moonlit forest path, just to the left, there was a wooden bench now. He could swear it hadn't been there before. Ice Bear set down his mug. "Bench not there 5 minutes ago." They stared at the painting in silence, the rain still pattering outside. Somewhere deep in the painted forest, a pale figure now stood by the bench watching. The figure in the painting was small, barely taller than the back of the bench, and its face, well, it didn't have a face. Just a pale, round blur, like the moon had fallen into the shape of a head. Grizz rubbed his eyes. "Okay. I'm tired, but not that tired. You guys see it too, right?" Panda nodded slowly, pulling his blanket closer. "Maybe it's just super realistic, like old paintings sometimes had weird people in them, right?" Ice Bear shook his head. "Figure wasn't there before." They decided to ignore it, or at least try to, and went back to sipping cocoa. But every so often, someone's eyes would drift back to the frame. Half an hour later, Panda froze. "Guys, the figure's closer." It was true. The bench was still there, but the figure now stood at the start of the path, as if it had taken a single step forward out of the painted trees. The moonlight in the painting seemed brighter now, too enough that it almost lit the living room like a dim nightlight. Grizz got up and tapped the glass. "Hey, Maybe it's like those paintings that change when you move. But no matter where he stood, the figure stayed where it was, staring straight out. Then they heard it. Not from the cave, not from outside. From inside the painting. A sound like someone brushing through leaves, slow, getting louder. Ice Bear stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the canvas. Something moving. The sound stopped, and then the figure was gone. The forest path in the painting now stretched empty and silent. But the bears could swear they heard faint breathing somewhere in the room. The living room felt heavier, as if the air had thickened. The cocoa in Grizz's mug had gone cold without him noticing. Panda pulled his blanket up to his chin, scanning the shadows. Maybe it's just my brain, Panda whispered. But does the floor look different? They all looked down. From the base of the painting's frame, a faint gray streak curved across the floor like the start of a dirt path. It wasn't a shadow, it wasn't dust. It looked painted. But the colors were too real, too textured, like they could step onto it if they tried. The sound of leaves rustling came again. Only this time, it wasn't muffled. It was right there in the cave, circling them. Grizz knelt down and brushed the strange path with his paw. The texture was soft at first, then crunchy, as if his paw had pressed into fallen leaves. When he pulled it back, a smear of dirt clung to his fur. Ice Bear's gaze shot to the painting. The path in the picture now stretched farther out of the frame, the painted forest pushing forward into the real room. And there, just at the edge of where the painting met reality, the faceless figure stood again. Closer than ever. Its head tilted just slightly as though it were listening. The moonlight from the painting spilled across the bear's paws, cold and silver. Panda shivered. Grizz, I think it's bringing the forest here. Before anyone could answer, a sudden gust of wind swept through the cave, but the windows were shut. The rustling leaves grew loud enough to drown out their breathing. And then softly, the figure stepped forward again. 1 foot in the painting. 1 foot in their living room. The cave smelled different, now damp earth, wet leaves, and something faintly metallic like old coins. The wind wasn't coming from the windows anymore. It was pouring out of the painting. Branches swayed in a wind that wasn't theirs. Shadows of trees danced across the cave walls, even though there were no trees in the room. The path was no longer a streak across the floor. It stretched all the way to the couch, curling around their paws. Tiny, glowing moths floated above it, blinking in and out like sparks. Panda clutched his blanket tighter. It's not stopping, is it? Grizz swallowed. Nope. And I think we're out of hot cocoa. Ice Bear stood between his brothers and the painting, watching. The faceless figure had stepped fully into the cave now. It was tall, taller than Grizz, and its pale head seemed to absorb the moonlight. Its arms hung loose at its sides, fingertips just brushing the tops of the moths as they passed. It didn't move toward them. It just stood there, listening. Grizz's voice cracked. Hi? Can we help you? The figure tilted its head. The forest behind it in the painting shifted, trees bending closer, roots crawling like snakes toward the frame's edge. For a moment, the bears thought they could hear whispering coming from deep in those woods. Ice Bear took a step forward. The figure took one too. The moths scattered in a sudden swirl, and for the briefest moment, the pale blur of its face almost formed an expression. Not a smile. Not anger. Something else. And then, without a sound, it lifted an arm and pointed not at the bears, but at the couch. Panda's stomach dropped. because on the couch, sitting neatly where Grizz's blanket had been just minutes ago, was another painting, an exact copy of their living room. Only in that one, the bears weren't there. The frame was smaller, darker, its wood chipped like it had been pulled out of the ground. Inside, the colors were muted, their couch, their lamp, their mugs, but no bears. Just the faint outline of the forest path curling through the living room like a ghost of dirt. Panda's voice trembled. That's our cave. But it's empty. Grizz took a cautious step closer, squinting. Maybe it's like foreshadowing, art stuff. Ice Bear shook his head. It's a warning. They leaned in, and that's when they saw it in the corner of the second painting. Behind where the couch would be, the faceless figure was half hidden, peeking out. Its head was tilted farther now, almost touching its shoulder. A small sound drifted out from the new frame. It was faint but steady drip. 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 Panda frowned. Do you guys hear? Drip. The bears turned. There, in the real cave, a wet spot was forming on the floor just beneath the real couch. A single, dark drop hit the wood. Grizz bent down and touched it with the tip of his claw. It's warm. From the painting, the faceless figure stepped forward again. Only this time, they could hear its foot touch the ground, not in the painting, but in their cave. The moths returned, floating in lazy spirals around it, their faint glow reflecting off the pale blur of its face. The second painting began to change. The empty couch faded, replaced by the bears standing in front of the frame exactly as they were now. Only, in the painted version, the figures stood right behind them. They spun around. Nothing. The path in the first painting was now brighter, like the moon was calling them in. The whispering in the forest was louder, layered, as if 100 voices were speaking at once, but none made sense. Grizz's throat went dry. I think it wants us to go in. The moonlight in the first painting was impossibly bright now, silvering every branch and stone. The path looked so clear, so inviting, almost warm. Panda shook his head. We're not going in there, right? Right? But the whispering was louder, swirling through the cave like wind inside a jar. Words began to form. Come home. Come home. Grizz took one step toward the painting, the glow brushing his fur. What if home isn't here anymore? The second painting, the one with them standing inside, shimmered. In it, their painted selves were already walking into the forest path, the faceless figure behind them. Ice Bear stared at the frame. We're already going. The moths floated closer, their soft light painting the bears' faces in gold. One landed on Panda's paw. It was warm. The air grew heavy and the smell of pine and cold water filled the cave. The floor under their paws softened dirt replacing wood. Grizz reached out. His claws touched the canvas, but it wasn't cloth anymore. It was air. And just like that, the bears stepped forward into the painted forest. The moths swirled after them, forming a slow, glowing spiral. Behind them, in the real world, the painting's frames were empty. Just blank wood, the glass reflecting nothing but shadows. Deep inside the painted forest, the moonlight was warm, the path endless, and the whispering soft now, like a lullaby. The faceless figure walked a few steps behind, not chasing, not leading, just making sure they didn't get lost. And somewhere far away in the empty cave, the frames began to quietly repaint, asterisk. And so the bears walked deeper into the moonlit forest. The whispering faded, replaced by the quiet hum of crickets and the slow, gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Their paw prints disappeared behind them, as though the path wanted them to forget the way back. The faceless figure followed at a calm, steady pace, and under that strange silver light, the forest wrapped around them like a blanket. The night was deep. The world was quiet. And somewhere far away, you are safe in your bed. Let the forest keep its secrets. Let your eyes grow heavy. Good night. Sweet dreams.